The street holds its quiet again. City Hall keeps its light, and position 12 is only a number on paper until next Halloween. Sleepy history. Horror files tonight's notes, sets the chair back under the desk, and lets the room breathe. Listeners are invited, softly, to leave a trace before leaving the night. City and local time for the map, the device playing in the dark, TV, phone, earbuds, and one small detail they noticed that others might miss. Those who want more nights like this can add a gentle subscribe. The bell can wait for morning. Requests for future history, horror, years, towns, old places with clean dates are welcome in the comments. Names and places will remain true. The telling will stay calm. The lights go low. The binder closes. The clock and the steeple agree. Sleepy history. Horror thanks whoever kept it company and wishes them a steady porch light, a quiet hinge, and a key that knows its dish. Good night. Hey everyone! Tonight's true stories stay as they happened. Real times, real places. Grab a blanket, keep the volume low, and settle in. Before we start, tell us your city and the time on your screen. What are you listening on? iPhone, Android, TV, car, or earbuds? If this keeps you company, hit subscribe when we're done. New stories roll in nightly. All right, let's begin. At 6:42 p.m., the parade marshal checked his clipboard and saw 12 lines. The map only showed 11. He stood under a street lamp outside City Hall, damp leaves sticking to his shoes, pencil tucked behind one ear. His name was Warren, and he had done this every Halloween since he got out of the service. He liked straight lines, clean starts, and the way brass bands made the air feel organized. Tonight the wind was mild and the lights along Main Street buzzed like sleepy crickets. The 11 registered floats idled along the curb, drivers in jackets, kids in costumes peeking over railings. 11 numbers painted on cardboard squares, 1 through 11 zip-tied to wooden dowels. The high school majorettes practiced a turn near the bank. The volunteer fire truck flashed a lazy red behind them. Warren counted again, slow and steady. 11. Then he looked up and saw a 12th set of headlights at the end of the block, idling quiet, frosting little puffs against the cooling night. It wasn't unusual for someone to show up late and confused. He walked toward the new headlights, heels tapping through grit. As he got closer, he could make out the float, a flatbed with plywood sides painted a dull slate blue. No banner, no sponsor name, no Snoopy or pumpkins, just cutouts of houses along the rails, simple shapes with square windows and peaked roofs, the kind a kid draws. A soft lamp under the plywood gave each window a faint yellow glow. The driver wore a cap and kept his hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward. Kids, 3 or 4 of them, stood behind the cutouts in plain coats and paper masks, the old kind with a flat face and thin elastic string. "Evening," Warren said, pencil back in his hand. "Which unit?" The driver didn't look at him. 12, he said. His voice was clear but not loud, like someone reading in a library. The hood ticked as the engine settled. Warren glanced at the cardboard numbers. There was no 12 in his stack. "You with the Lions, the choir, VFW?" "Neighborhood," the driver said. The kids behind the cutouts turned their masked faces together, not quite in unison. The masks were blank, off-white, with oval eyes cut too large. One mask had a little tear at the mouth. Warren felt a breeze pass between him and the truck, like air leaving a room. "Neighborhood what?" Warren asked. He kept his tone friendly. He'd learned people answered better when you sounded like you already knew. "Birch." The driver blinked slow. "Birch Street." Birch Street ran 3 blocks north of Main, a tidy row of post-war houses with crabapple trees. Warren pictured it in the daytime, mailboxes, trimmed lawns, the fire hydrant with the chipped blue cap. He wrote Birch, then stopped because he didn't know what to write after it. "All right," he said, "you're not on my sheet. Parade order is tight. Can you fall in at the rear?" 12, the driver said again. He moved one hand off the wheel, long enough to tap the edge of a small sign wired to the flatbed's rail. There was a number painted in thin black strokes. Warren leaned closer. It was a 12, neat as a math problem, brushed with the careful hand of someone who didn't rush. He stood there a second longer, feeling the parade behind him breathe and rustle and cough. The band instructor blew a test note. The majorettes clicked their batons on asphalt. From the Methodist church, a clock struck 2 faint chimes, out of time with the hour. Warren looked back toward City Hall to wave over a helper and call this in. When he turned around, one of the paper masks had shifted. The tear at the mouth was wider now, like damp paper softening at the fold. And inside the eye oval, the yellow looked less like lamplight and more like a room. "Hold here," Warren said, softer than he meant. "I'll get you placed." He walked back toward the lamp with the extra number sitting heavy on his clip. When he reached the curb and looked over his shoulder, the 12th float had already rolled itself precisely into position between 11 and the fire truck without a sound. Warren cut across the staging lane to the card table where the 2 student volunteers guarded a thermos and a stack of safety pins. He kept his voice even. "We've got a late unit. No paperwork. Says neighborhood, Birch Street." Driver insists on 12. Marla, the nurse who doubled as parade radio, lifted her head from the clipboard. "We don't have a 12, she said. "We've got 11 floats, then the fire truck, then walkers from the food shelf." She thumbed a page. It was 12 back in the spring draft before cancellations. The grocery pulled out. We renumbered. She tapped the printed line where a tiny correction mark lived like a fly speck. 11. Warren looked back down Main. The 12th flatbed idled where he'd left it, light in the cut-out windows, steady as if plugged into a wall. The masked kids didn't fidget the way kids usually did. They held their paper sacks by the twisted handles and stared straight ahead at nothing in particular. The driver's cap brim pointed at the courthouse dome. "Fine," Warren said. "We'll tuck them at the rear and keep them moving." He pocketed the pencil and took a radio from Marla. It was the big grey kind with the crackled Bakelite mic. He pressed the talk bar. "Start line 30 seconds. Bands, eyes up." He heard his own voice come back thin from the speaker of someone down the block. At 6:58 the marshal whistle blew. The majorettes stepped out, sequins catching the last of the day. Parents clapped. Little kids on hay bales bounced against bales of cornstalks and shouted at friends. An older man in a navy peacoat saluted the VFW banner as it went by, then folded his hand against his chest like he'd put something away there for later. The ordered parts soothed Warren. He liked when moving parts found their grooves. He checked the gaps with his eye and walked the line slow, light on his heels. Between positions 10 and 11 the air felt ordinary. Diesel, kettle corn, October. Between 11 and the fire truck it felt cooler, the way church basements felt when you opened the metal door and that first breath of lined-up chairs rolled over your shoulders. The 12th float had slid in there, precise as a book slipped back into its slot. No squeal of tires, no hand signals from the driver, just there. "Driver," Warren said, stepping to the rail. "You'll keep a car length, no stopping for photos. If you need to pull out, hand signal me." The driver nodded once. Close up, the cap had a thin dust line where the brim met the crown, like it had sat on a hook a long time. He kept his hands on the wheel. The instrument cluster glowed a dull amber. Warren's eyes fell to a small square tag, pinned behind the plate frame. A diagonal corner was missing. The year on the tab was printed in a tiny font that looked older than the others on the block. The float rolled forward. The plywood houses went by slow, 6 on a side, each with a little cut-out window and a number penciled faint in the trim. 214, 220, 296. Warren knew some of the addresses on Birch by heart from his route to the hardware store. The numbers on the float didn't line up with the map in his head. There was a 232 with a window too narrow, a 240 with a second door drawn in graphite and rubbed mostly away. From the crowd, a woman in a headscarf raised a mittened hand and then didn't wave. Her mouth opened a little. Warren tracked her line of sight. One of the masked kids had turned its head, slow like a clock hand, to look straight at her. The oval eyes were nothing but holes, but the look still landed. The kid lifted its paper sack once, as if testing the weight of something that wasn't in it yet. The fire truck behind them gave a cheerful little whoop that came out thin like it had been stuffed with cloth. The chief leaned on the wheel and grinned anyway. People waved. A little boy on his dad's shoulders shouted, "House Street!" and slapped his mitten against his father's forehead in excitement. As the line took its first left, Warren swung out to check the corner for tight turns. He bent to pick up a dropped baton cap and found a small rectangle of grey paper near the gutter, damp but stiff. He turned it over in his palm. It was a hand-drawn map in pencil, smudged at the creases, main, second, third, and a neat little spur labelled Birch with a faint arrow back toward the parade route. In the lower right, in tidy block letters, someone had written, Position 12. Under it, a date. The 6 looked like it might once have been a 5 that someone carefully rewrote. He blinked at it and heard the Methodist clock strike a single note, off by a minute. He looked up, radio half lifted to ask Marla if anyone had submitted a neighborhood float last minute. Maybe something simple. The 12th flatbed passed the lamppost. For a breath, the yellow in the little windows wasn't lamp yellow at all. It was the kind of light you got from a kitchen at dinner time, warm and human, and bending around a moving figure that crossed from one window to the next, just out of view. The parade found its pace. Snare drums stitched a soft line down Main, and the cheer squad kept time with low kicks that didn't try to steal the show. Warren walked the gutter, one step off the curb, the way he always did, half in the parade, half out with the crowd. He checked gaps, gave easy hand signs, and let his radio ride quiet on his belt. Every few yards he glanced back at the fire truck, and then at the 12th flatbed, like a man keeping an eye on weather. "Copy, start!" Marla's voice crackled once, calm as a nurse in a hallway. "Hold a slow roll by the bakery. The walkers need space." Warren lifted a palm and circled 2 fingers. The majorettes shortened their steps without looking back. The line breathed in, then out. He drifted alongside the slate-blue float as it eased past the hardware store. Up close, the plywood houses showed pencil ghosts, erased curtains, an old chimney sketched and rubbed away, a porch rail drawn once and redrawn lower. A tiny pencil note above one window read "Picture," then an X through it. Warren knew the real house at 226 had a big picture window, since the owner put it in last spring. The cutout had a narrow slit instead, like the window before the remodel. The kids behind the rails didn't wave. They held their paper sacks by the tops and watched ahead, as if there were rules. Their coats were plain, the sort you'd hand down. The paper masks had those thin holes at nose and mouth that make the breath sound papery when a kid laughs. Only there wasn't any laughing. A faint rattle came from one of the sacks when the flatbed hit a seam in the asphalt, soft and dry, like buttons in a jar.
"Evening, Warren." A man near the barber shop stuck out a mitten. "You're a machine." Warren smiled and touched the mitten quick. The man followed the 12th float with his eyes and cocked his head. "Huh, they doing Birch?" That looks like the Swenson porch." His wife put a hand on his sleeve and said, "Don't," in a voice that wasn't angry, just done with a subject. They both watched anyway.
At the corner by the bank, a boy in a wool cap framed a Polaroid through mitten lumps and pressed the silver shutter. The camera's motor whined and gave up a square that his dad fanned like a playing card. "Let it sit," the dad said. They walked while the square darkened and then lifted the picture together. Warren only caught it sideways, but the 12th float in the little square looked softer than the others, like breath on glass. The windows on the cutouts had lace in the photo, tiny triangles, though he was sure he saw nothing but yellow and blank wood in real time. "Driver," Warren said, keeping his voice easy as they took the long bend by the post office. "You're lit nice. What are you using under there? Not a generator, I hope." He mostly said it to hear the man talk. The driver kept his eyes ahead. "Separate line," he said. "Already on." His tone had that library weight again, like the words belonged to a card somewhere. A turn signal clicked once on the truck. One slow pulse left, then went dark, even though the route went straight. Warren looked for the lever on the column and didn't see the driver move a finger. He glanced down at the plate again. The tiny corner tag had a serifed font you didn't see much anymore. The diagonal tear had rounded edges like it hadn't been torn today. They crossed second. Wind carried the smell of kettle corn and wet wool around the courthouse. Warren felt the small fold of grey paper in his pocket, the map with position 12 and the careful 6 over a 5, and decided he'd ask Marla to check the spring list after they cleared third. He pictured the renumbering meeting in a fluorescent room, someone scratching out the grocery and sliding units up a line, the old 12 waiting on paper with no place to go. Just past the bakery, a traffic cone had crept into the lane. Warren stepped off the curb to nudge it back. The fire truck rolled by with its friendly whoop. The slate-blue flatbed followed, quiet as a book. As he set the cone, something clicked against his boot and skated to a stop on the painted line. He crouched and pinched it up between glove fingers. It was a small brass key worn flat at the teeth from a life of pockets. A thin blue tag clung to a rusted ring. On the tag, in tidy block letters, someone had written 232 Birch. The ink had bled a little at the edges from damp, but the numbers were plain. Warren turned the key in his glove and looked up the block, past the float's plywood houses, toward where Birch cut away into dark trees. He knew 232. He'd helped carry a couch out of 232 the summer they took the porch down. The key felt warm in his glove. The tag, the part where the 2 met the 3, looked like it had been written over something else. Warren slipped the key into his inner pocket and let the ring settle flat against his shirt. He didn't like loose metal when he was on a route. It made him feel unfinished. The band rounded third with an easy left. The cheer squad followed with a low chant that sounded like fog over water. He lifted a palm to hold a gap for the antique tractors and watched the 12th flatbed take the corner without brake squeal or bounce. The plywood houses didn't shiver. "Marla," he said into the mic, keeping his voice low, "can you pull the spring draft for me? Anything listed as neighborhood? Birch?" Static hissed and then her steady tone. "Stand by." She was good with paper. You could hear people turning pages when she worked, quick and sure. "Okay, I've got April. There's a Birch Street Neighborhood Association, home front theme. Notes say simple build, no generator, approved position 12. Then a line through it. Withdrawn, initialed, but no reason. "Copy," he said. He watched the driver's cap pass the pharmacy and felt the tiny pull a straight line can exert. "Thanks. Do you want me to ask who reinstated?" Warren thought about the careful 6 written over a 5 on the map. Hold for now. The crowd was thicker by the pharmacy. A woman in a pea coat had climbed onto the low stone planter to get a clean view. She cupped a hand to her mouth but didn't call out, just breathed like she'd taken a step too fast. Warren looked where she looked. On the float, behind the cutouts, one of the kids had shifted so that the oval eye of the mask lined with a window. For a blink, the yellow behind the oval and the yellow in the window matched in a way that felt like a thing clicking into place. Then the kid straightened. He came even with the driver's door. "You lost a key back there," he said, tapping his pocket. "Blue tag." "Not mine," the driver said. He didn't turn his head. "It's for the blue one." Warren glanced along the rail. The sixth house on the right had pencil scrawl near the eave, blue, faint, then rubbed once, and written again darker. The number penciled in the trim read 232. The cutout showed a narrow slit for a picture window and a porch with 3 steps instead of the 4 he remembered. He said, "They took that porch down last summer." "They put it up again," the driver said. Same library voice, like he was reading the line you point to with your finger. A soft clack came from one of the paper sacks. A second clack answered it from the other side, not like candy, more like small things meeting with edges. The kids held the sack steady as if the sound wasn't theirs. A mittened hand from the crowd, old skin inside the yarn, extended a small candy bar toward the closest mask. The kid lifted the sack. The candy bar paused in the air, then tilted back toward the mitten. The hand lowered slow. The kid's mask turned forward. By the post office, the Methodist clock chimed once, late again by a minute. Warren checked his watch out of habit. His seconds ran fine. The parade's breath held and let go in the usual ways. Laugh, whistles, a stroller wheel catching a crack and bumping free. Nothing wrong if you wrote it down. And still something leaning. He drifted behind the flatbed and looked under it for a cable. The lamp glow in the little windows had no cord that he could see. No generator hum, just the even tick of a motor and the soft hiss of tires. He ducked back out. The driver's turn signal winked once, left, then died. The route stayed straight. Birch Street turned off 2 blocks ahead, a quiet cut with crabapple trees, and that hydrant with the chipped blue cap. "Marla," he said, "what's the listed date on that spring draft?" "April 10th, filed March 29th. Paper shuffled. "The withdrawal is stamped May 6th. Why?" "Just lining my ducks," he said. He touched the edge of the map in his pocket and felt the little ridge where the 5 had become a 6. He pictured someone leaning at a kitchen table with a good pencil, making the corrections slow so no one could tell. They crossed 4th. Kettle corns sweetened the wet wool again. The antique tractors popped and coughed like old stories. The fire truck behind the float gave its friendly whoop. It came out thin and far away, as if the sound had to travel a longer road than the asphalt they were on. A man in a corduroy coat stepped off the curb, without looking, drawn toward the blue 232, the way a person steps toward a song they used to know. Warren's hand went up out of habit. The man stopped with his toe, kissing the paint line and his breath showing. He whispered to no one in particular. They had curtains like that before Christmas, and then seemed to hear himself, and shook his head and climbed back up. Birch Street came up slow on the left. In the curve of its darkness, a porch light blinked alive like a wink from an old friend. Warren raised his palm to hold the line true. Up in the cab, the driver's thumb didn't move. The turn signal pulsed once more, quiet as a moth tapping glass. The paper sacks on the flatbed settled together and made that small, dry clack, like keys finding each other in the dark. Birch Street opened on the left, like a mouth he knew. No traffic, crab apples black against porch bulbs, the hydrant's chipped blue cap catching a little light. Warren moved ahead of the 12th flatbed and put his body where he would normally put a cone. He lifted a palm to hold the line straight across the mouth of Birch and gave the small circle sign for easy pace. The driver eased up even with him and let the truck crawl. The turn signal pulsed once, left, then went dark on its own. The driver's hands stayed at 10 and 2. From behind the cutouts, the kids held their sacks, not moving them, not rustling. The yellow in the plywood windows leaned warmer as the corner approached, like heat near an open oven. "Keep straight," Warren said. He kept his voice at the tone he used when telling a dog to heel, without making it skittish. "Route stays on main." The driver's chin dipped a fraction. "We keep to the map." He didn't look at Warren. He didn't look at Birch. He looked through the glass like there was only one picture to watch. He lifted one hand long enough to tap the small clipboard propped against the dash. A sheet lay under its clip, thick paper gone soft at the edges. Warren could see block letters from the sidewalk. Position 12, Birch. The date at the top had a 6, written over something darker, the same careful correction as on the grey slip in Warren's pocket. The fire truck behind them breathed a long, easy idle. Somewhere back by the pharmacy, a stroller wheel bumped a crack, and a kid laughed once. In the Methodist tower, the clock put out a single, late chime, 1 minute behind again. Warren's wristwatch ticked on his pulse. "Marla," he said into his mic without turning his head. "Confirm we're not to send anything down Birch. We've got pressure at the corner." Her answer came clean. "Copy. PD asked we keep Birch clear tonight on account of a gas company patch earlier. Cones pulled this afternoon, but request stands. 10-4. He stepped half a heel deeper into the lane, the way you do when you mean the line holds. He pointed with 2 fingers along Main. The driver's hands did not move. The steering wheel gave a tiny nudge left by itself, just enough for the left front tire to kiss the paint that began Birch. The turn signal clicked once and hushed. On the rail, the little houses drifted past Warren's chest. 214 with penciled curtains rubbed thin. 220 with a porch line drawn twice. 226 with a narrow window where the big one ought to be. The light in the cutouts lifted and bent like someone crossing a room. It went window to window in step with the doorways. It reached the blue-marked one, 232, and paused. For a breath, what came from that cutout wasn't lamp yellow. It was a dinner light at eye height, and the shape that crossed it felt like a person leaning to set down a plate. The nearest masked child made the smallest tilt, aligning its oval eye with the 232 window. The sack in its hand gave that dry clack again, answer clicked by another sack across the flatbed. Keys, Warren thought, and didn't like thinking it. The brass key in his inner pocket warmed as if the parade had turned into July, and the sun had found it through his coat. A woman on the nearest porch, real porch, not cut out, stepped down 2 steps without her coat, and stopped like she'd remembered something she shouldn't say out loud. "Not down there," she said, but quiet to herself. Not again. Her porch light blinked once and held. Warren took 2 fingers off his palm and made a short, straight slice toward the line ahead. "Stay with your unit," he told the driver. "Keep your place. PD request." For the first time, the driver turned his head enough that Warren could see the cut of his cheek. Not young, not old, the kind of face that goes at the hardware store and the bank without needing anyone to remember it. "We were placed at 12, he said. He said it like reciting a rule pinned over a sink. "You are at 12, Warren said, and 12 goes straight." The wheel stilled, the tire eased off the birch paint, a whisper of rubber on cold line. The flatbed rolled on. The light inside the little 232 dropped back to its regular yellow, like heat closing a door. The masked kids set their sacks against their knees and held them there. The paper didn't rustle. As the truck straightened, the porch at the real 232, 2 blocks off and to the left, snapped its light off and then on again, like someone flicking a switch to be sure they still could. Warren let his hand fall and exhaled in a way no one would hear. The fire truck gave its cheerful whoop, and it came out thin and far away again, as if it had to travel from a place with more air. The brass key shifted against his shirt by itself, or he told himself it was his breathing that did it. He touched the edge through the fabric. The ring felt notched with an extra shape. He pressed the metal flat with his palm and kept walking the gutter, the corner of birch at his back, the turn signal quiet for now, the yellow squares of the little houses moving on down Main like a film you couldn't pause. The reviewing stand came into view, a plywood box dressed with bunting, a microphone on a bent neck, a card table with paper cups. 2 city councilmen shared a blanket over their knees. The announcer, a math teacher in a scarf, worked through his stack of index cards, breath fogging the mic. "Position 9, he said, a little proud. "Antique tractors." The speaker crackled and settled. "Position 10, Hartman's hardware wagon. Position 11, Anoka high band." Warren watched the 12th flatbed drift toward the chalk line painted across Main. The driver eased the truck until its front tire kissed the mark. No bounce, no correction. The plywood houses sat square to the stand. The little windows glowed like they had sockets. The announcer lifted his next card and frowned. He brought it closer to his glasses. "Position?" He tapped the corner with a mitten. 12, Birch Street Neighborhood Association, home front theme. He looked up, surprised at his own voice, then blinked and went on. "Welcome. Very nice." He turned the card over and his eyes pinched at the margin. From the curb, Warren could see a small number written in pencil at the top. The last digit had been written over, slow and hard, a 6 pinned on top of something darker. Marla's radio voice brushed his belt. "Copy that?" she asked, like she had heard the same pencil marks through the speaker. "Copy," he said. He didn't lift the mic. He stood at the corner of the stand and kept his hands easy where people could see them. A City Line crewman in a quilted vest stepped out from behind the bunting and pointed his chin at the float. "You got a feed permit?" he said, but more to Warren than to the driver. "We didn't drop a line here." The driver didn't answer. The lamp yellow in the cutout stayed even. The crewman crouched and peered under the rail. He wiped a knuckle on the axle and stood up with clean fingers. "No cord, no hum," he said to himself, and tap-tapped his wedding ring once against the plywood. The ring made a sound like it had touched glass. A girl on the planter, too big for a costume but wearing fox ears anyway, raised a Polaroid and took a picture of the float square on. The camera chewed and gave her the white border. She held it by a corner and blew. When the square darkened, she and her friend leaned together. "Look," the friend said, voice small. "Curtains." In the tiny image, lace hung in the little windows where bare plywood should have been. In one, a shape like a person had just cleared the frame. "Keep it moving," Warren told the line with a gentle wind of his fingers. He walked 2 paces alongside the flatbed as it left the chalk. The masked kids kept their sacks steady. One sack ticked once, and a cleaner metal click answered from inside the rail. Something small slid out of a gap and kissed the pavement near Warren's boot. He picked it up without stopping. It was a tin address numeral, a 2 paint, flaked to air blue in the grooves. The screw holes were worn in an oval like the screws had been tightened and loosened a dozen times in the same wood. He closed his hand on it and felt, through his glove, a little cold stitched into the metal. He put the 2 with the key in his inner pocket and felt them find each other in the cloth with a tiny, private tap. "Warren!" the fire chief called from his cab, friendly as always. "You want us to give him a squeeze past the stand?" He meant a horn pop. His grin said he liked the old jokes of parades. "Hold it light," Warren said. "They're lit fine." The Methodist clock gave one chime, a minute late again. The announcer cleared his throat. His next card read, "Food Shelf Walkers," but he stared at the back of the Birch card a second longer like a teacher stuck on a problem. He slid the pencil from behind his ear and traced the last digit once. The shavings tacky on the graphite edge made a soft sound like paper creasing. Past the stand, a patrolman fell in beside Warren for half a block. "We kept Birch shut after the patch," he said, eyes on the crowd. "Same cross as the service call last." He stopped. He seemed to remember not to finish. "You good here?" "I'm good," Warren said. The brass key pressed a coin of warmth against his shirt. The tin, too, leaned into it like a magnet that wasn't quite a magnet. The driver's turn signal clicked once, left, then slept. Birch had fallen behind them, but the map in Warren's pocket showed a stub of a spur at the far end of the route, a neat, right-angled bite where the parade doubled back by the school. If a man traced that line with a finger and forgot where the pen should stop, he might wander it right to Birch again. As they rolled by the Five and Dime, a woman with a paper sack of onions stopped short and stared at the blue-marked house on the rail. "That's ours," she said to the air, "before we put in the storm door." She lifted her free hand as if to touch the cutout, then drew it back like heat had cocked her wrist. The kid behind the rail turned its mask a fraction, aligning the oval eye with 232. The sack in its hand gave that dry clack, and 3 other sacks answered across the flatbed in a patient rhythm, like people fishing for the right key on a ring. Warren let his breath in and out through his nose. He walked the gutter, checked the gaps, made the pictures small in his head the way he always did. The 12th float kept to its line with the same quiet certainty it had at the start. It would keep to the map, he understood now, the map with the slow 6 written over the 5, even if the street itself had been asked to stay empty. He didn't know yet what he would do when the route bent back. He knew he would be there when it did. The school came up in a soft slope of blacktop and chain link. The place where the route pinched did its tidy U and sent everyone back along the other side of Main. Warren always liked this part. It was a hinge you could feel under your shoes. If a lineup was going to fight you, it fought here. He eased ahead to check the barricades. 2 sawhorses in stripes, one with a splintered leg taped, and a deputy with mittens tucked under his armpits for warmth. "Birch stays shut," the deputy said, before Warren asked. "Gas patch isn't cured. Street crew wants a clean night." He looked past Warren at the slate-blue flatbed. "You got a nice, quiet one." "Quiet's my favorite kind," Warren said. He radioed Marla anyway. "Confirm closure on Birch at the school side." "Confirmed," she said. Paper moved under her voice. "Line note says we swung a horse there at 4. The spare is marked Birch in old stencil. Don't let anyone move it." Warren pictured the old stencil, letters you could feel with your thumb. "Copy," he said. He glanced at the curve chalked across the blacktop, the white turning arrows that sent units right and back down the opposite lane. The 12th flatbed came smooth toward the hinge, the driver's hands set at 10 and 2 like clock arms. The turn signal clicked once, left, against the painted right arrow, then slept. It wasn't defiant. It was as if the signal had its own map to follow and was polite enough to whisper it. He stepped up to the rail for the length of a breath as the plywood houses rolled by. He expected the same lamp yellow. For a blink, he got something else. the low gold that comes off a kitchen under a ceiling light, a shade of warmth that looks like supper. In that warmth, a person-shaped absence crossed from one cut-out window to the next, shoulder height, slow as someone carrying a frame to the wall. The light bent and resumed. A soft, dry clack came from a sack near his knee. Another answered from the opposite side. The closest masked child tilted its head the way kids do when they're listening hard in a classroom, the oval eye holes leveling with the window marked 232. The small tear at the mask's mouth had worked longer by now, a little smile that wasn't a smile, paper fibre showing. Behind the eye hole, the yellow held like a room holding a breath. Something kissed the blacktop and spun to stop against Warren's boot. He wiped his glove once on his coat and picked it up. Another tin numeral, this one a 3, same air blue paint in the grooves, same ovaled screw holes. He felt the 2 in his inner pocket, meet it through cloth with a private tick, like people recognizing each other without making a scene. He didn't put them together. He only let the 3 ride there, warm against the 2 and the brass key with its blue tag. "Driver," he said, walking even with the door as the hinge tightened. "You'll take the right and return down Main. After the stand, pull to the curb for paperwork." "We return on Birch," the driver said, eyes ahead. He touched the clipboard with one finger, then let his hand fall back to the wheel. "Placed at 12. "You're at 12, Warren said. 12 bends right with everyone else." The driver's chin dipped, not a nod, not a no. The wheel didn't argue. The front tire took the chalk line and the truck's weight leaned, the way a good hinge leans when it means to close clean. The fire truck behind gave its small whoop, and again it came out farther away than it should have, like sound taking a longer sidewalk. The Methodist tower put out one chime, late by a minute, steady about it. On the opposite curb, where units would pass once they'd made the turn, people had begun to face back toward town, ready to watch it all twice. An older man in a watch cap lifted a hand at the blue-marked house on the rail and let it fall as if the motion cost him. "We never kept the brass when we put in the aluminum," he said, to no one. "Should have kept the brass." His wife tightened her scarf and gave him her sleeve to hold. They completed the bend. The slate-blue flatbed slotted into its mirror path like a train switching tracks. For a moment, the barricade down the mouth of Birch matched in Warren's eye the little penciled stub on the grey map in his pocket, the neat spur you take with your finger when you forget where the pen is supposed to stop. He moved to the sawhorse out of reflex and set his palm on the board. The old stencil Birch was there in ghost letters under newer paint. The wood was colder than the air. He kept the flatbed on his left now, walking the gutter the other direction. The kids stood with their sacks at the same patient height. The sacks didn't swell like they would if candy were piling. They kept the small, orderly clacks as the truck rolled, like a drawer where things don't tangle. The light in the little windows found itself and held. A boy on the curb held out a fun-size bar without thinking. The nearest mask turned, then didn't reach, and the boy, not hurt by the refusal, put the bar back in his mitten. His dad said, "Different kind of float," in a tone that wasn't a joke. The announcer's mic popped and then settled into reading the next card, his breath steady, as if the stack had no surprises left. Warren let the school slide behind them. He watched the line find itself again. He could feel the pull that comes when two paths almost want to cross. The painted right turn they'd taken, and the penciled left the clipboard wanted. His job, he told himself, had always been to keep paper and pavement in agreement long enough to get everyone home. He felt the 2, the 3, and the brass key touch in his pocket, like a reminder written on his own skin. He didn't look back at Birch. He would see it again soon enough, even if the route did not. The return leg thinned the noise the way night thins a fairground. Same lights, fewer voices. Warren liked this stretch because folks had seen what they'd see and settled into watching the backs of things. He counted gaps by habit and let his boots find the gutter seam. The fire truck idled steady behind the slate-blue flatbed. The 12th stayed in its lane like it had been taught young and never forgot. "Review stand clear, last walkers past the 5 and dime," Marla said in his radio, paperwork rustling like leaves. "You'll hit City Hall right on time." "Copy," he said. He didn't say the time his watch kept was a minute ahead of the Methodist Tower, and had been all night. He caught the first smell before he knew to name it. Faint, not the popcorn or wool or exhaust, something like the cold breath from a pilot light when you crack a door to look. He told himself it was nothing he could hang a note on. He walked 2 paces faster until he was even with the flatbed again. The plywood houses kept their simple faces, numbers penciled clean, where paint would go if someone ever painted. 214, 226, the erased chimney ghost, the curtain note rubbed thin. The blue mark 232 weighted 6 windows down like a thought you try not to think until you do. Behind the rail, the kids held their paper sacks in exactly the same place they had when they'd headed out, elbows soft, wrists still. When the truck rolled over a line in the asphalt, the sacks gave that dry clack. Another answered from the opposite side, then a third clack after a breath, as if a hand had tested for a third pocket on a rink and found it. At the corner by the old shoe store, something slid from the gap in the rail and nicked Warren's boot. He stooped without calling attention to it and pinched it from the paint with 2 fingers. Another tin numeral, this one a 2, same air blue paint in the groove, same worn oval holes. He opened his inner pocket with the back of his wrist and let it drop with the other 2 and the 3. The 3 pieces touched in the dark like neighbors finding their places on a porch at dusk. The brass key leaned against them and made the softest tap, polite and sure. A woman with a baby on her hip watched the blue-marked cutout slide by. "Before the storm door," she said under her breath, and pressed her cheek to the baby's cap without knowing she'd done it. The masked child nearest the blue window tipped its head 1 degree, aligning the oval eye with the cutout. The tear at the mouth had worked longer, threads loose. Behind the oval, the yellow warmed and then cooled, like a room when a door opens and closes for someone you can't see. "Marla," Warren said, eyes forward. "Status on Birch, both ends." "Closed," she said. "Deputy says horses still up. We borrowed the spare with the old stencil for the school side. Why?" "Keeping the line honest," he said. He did not say the pilot's smell was a whisper in his nose now, not strong, just present the way an old habit is present. They rolled past the hardware store where the route had first felt pressure. Ahead, City Hall rose with its clean light and the flag lifting in small night wind. To the left, down a half block, the mouth of Birch waited the way doorways wait when you know a house. The hydrant's blue cap took enough light to show the chip. A sawhorse crouched at the curb mouth, legs planted, striped board faced upstream. Birch, stenciled in ghost letters under newer paint, the same old letters he'd felt with his thumb at the school side. The turn signal on the cab ticked once, left, and slept. Warren moved into the slot where he would put a cone if he had one. He lifted his palm. "Straight on," he said, voice level. "End at City Hall. Paperwork at the table." The driver's hands stayed at 10 and 2. He tapped the little clipboard with a finger. "Placed at 12, he said. It wasn't argument, just the line a man has said before and would say again, until it didn't need saying. "You are at 12, Warren said, "and 12 goes straight." He kept 2 fingers extended down Main, showing the line like a string. The masked kids didn't look at him. They didn't look at the crowd. Their sacks rested against their knees. Clack, clack, clack. 2, 3, 2. The rhythm landed in his bones before he let himself count it. The fire truck behind them put out its cheerful whoop, and it came from a little farther away than the rear bumper, as if it had to travel down a hall and around a corner to get here. A man on the near porch stepped down 1 tread and then up again, like he'd changed his mind mid-chew. "Not down there," he said, same quiet voice as the woman earlier. "Leave it." Warren set his palm on the sawhorse board. The wood was colder than the air again. The old stencil under the paint pressed back into his skin a little. In his pocket, the numerals had arranged themselves without his help, 2 against 3 against 2, and the brass key warmed as if a hand had closed around it on the other side of his coat. He told himself it was his own heat. The cab's turn signal clicked once, left. The left front tire kissed the white edge where Birch began. The wheel did not turn in the driver's hands. It moved the way a well-trained dog leans when the leash slackens, gently, like it believes it's doing a good job. "Stay with me," Warren said, and took half a step deeper into the lane, the kind of half-step you mean. The Methodist clock answered him with 1 soft, late chime, and the sacks on the flatbed gave their patient reply. 2, 3, 2, like a door code, said with breath. The left front tire took another whisper of the Birch line. Warren put his palm out flat, the old traffic cop picture he'd learned from men before him, and eased the sawhorse a half step deeper with his thigh. The striped board rasped his coat. The wood felt colder than the air again, like basement steps. "Hold, hold," he said, easy voice, for the driver and the crowd both. "Straight to City Hall. Paperwork there." Behind the slate-blue flatbed, the fire chief lifted both hands, palms up, "Your call, Marshal," and gave the horn a friendly nudge that came out thin and far. The deputy at the hinge side called, "Birch is shut," into the night like the night might argue. The turn signal clicked once, left, and slept. The wheel didn't twitch under the driver's hands. The truck itself did the leaning, gentle as a dog that knows the old route. The plank of the sawhorse kissed the bumper and then slid along it without a bump. The horse's legs found new places on their own, little squeaks of old grain shifting. The ghost letters under the paint, Birch, flashed across Warren's sleeve and were gone. "Marla," he said low into his mic, "we've got a unit edging Birch at City Hall. I'm with it. Keep the line steady." Paper moved under her tone. He could hear it. "Copy. PD says they're walking." A beat. "You good?" "I'm here," he said. The words felt like a thing you put in the doorway so it doesn't close. He stepped with the flatbed as it nosed a car length down Birch, slow as if the street had a slope you couldn't see. The pilot light breath was clearer here, not a stink, just a presence, the way a pilot is a presence. Crab apples dotted the black like coin drops. The hydrant's blue cap took a shard of light. Porches along the first run showed people but not voices, hands on rails, shoulders turned half out, the small still of folks watching a house they know. The plywood houses on the rail shifted with the angle, showing their numbers to Birch instead of to Main. 2 on Tikisi, 2 on 20, 2 on 26. The eraser ghosts caught the street lamp like frost. The blue marked 2 on 32 came on slow around the slats, a cut-out window with a narrow slit where Warren remembered a big pane, a pencil porch with 3 steps where his legs remembered 4 from moving that couch last summer. The yellow in the little window took on that kitchen shade again, low and human. A shape crossed it, shoulder height, like a person getting up to answer something, and deciding to sit down first. The masked kids adjusted not at all, except that the nearest one, by the blue mark, tipped a degree so its oval eye and the cut-out window lined in a straight shot down the truck and out into the dark where 232 would be. The tear at the mask's mouth had worked longer. White fibers showed like threads on a shirt cuff. Their paper sacks made the patient rhythm he'd been trying not to count. 2, 3, 2, and then a pause, respectful as a knock. Warren felt the brass key shift under his coat and find the tin numerals. Through the cloth, the 2 and the 3 and the 2 met with a small, polite tap. He didn't take them out. He put his hand over the pocket like you keep a ticket from blowing. "Driver," he said, walking even with the door. "We keep Birch shut tonight. Gas patch earlier. You'll help me keep it clean." "We return on Birch," the driver said. Not hard, not soft. He tapped the clipboard with one finger, as if pointing to his own eyes. "Placed at 12. "Who placed you?" Warren asked, and surprised himself with the question. "The list," the driver said. "The April list." His hands held the wheel the way a man holds a stair rail when the light's out, steady so he can feel if it's still there. The deputy's boots scuffed up beside Warren and stopped. "You want me to pull them?" he asked under his breath, like the float could overhear. His mittened thumb aimed toward the cab latch. "Not yet," Warren said. He didn't know why not yet made sense, only that stopping things sometimes breaks them worse. "Hold your horse at the mouth." They rolled another half-house length. On a porch 3 doors in, a woman in slippers put a hand to her throat and then took it down, not in fear exactly, but the way you do when you think you might say a name and decide not to. On the opposite side, a man in a work jacket took one step off his stoop and back, like the porch had told him to. At the second crabapple, something small slid from the gap in the rail and clicked the blacktop by Warren's boot. He bent, without looking like he'd bent, and pinched it up. A tin numeral again, the final 2, same air blue paint in the groove, same ovaled holes. It was colder than the others had been, and wetter, as if it had come out of a pocket after a walk in November. He let it kiss the other pieces in his inner pocket. The 4 bits made a single thing in the cloth. The brass key settled against it and stayed. The Methodist clock gave its single late chime, 1 minute wrong, right on schedule. The sound slid down Birch and came back thinner, as if the street were longer than it used to be. In the cab, the turn signal ticked once, left, courteous as ever. The blue-marked cut-out window held its yellow the way a room holds a breath. "Straight to City Hall," Warren said, not to argue, but because saying the line out loud kept the paper and the pavement in the same room a little longer. He set his palm on the cold rail of the sawhorse they'd dragged with them and felt the ghost letters under the paint push back into his hand. The float slowed like a man easing to a mailbox. 2, 3, 2. The sacks gave their patient reply. Birch held sound like a mitten. Same noise, softer. The slate-blue flatbed eased 2 car lengths in, respectful as a man hat in hand at a doorway. The deputy kept one boot against the curb mouth and watched the driver's hands like a student watches chalk. The pilot light breath was clearer here, not sharp, just present, like heat you know is tucked behind metal. Porch bulbs peered through bare branches. Mailboxes sat square as knuckles. Warren felt the street know its own order. He counted without meaning to. 214 on the left with its slanted step, 220 with the dented rail, 226 with that penciled chimney ghost now real in brick. The blue-marked one, 232, waited 2 doors on, real porch in shadow, porch light off. On the rail of the float, the cutout 232 carried its narrow window and 3-step porch. the way a memory carries the version before a change. The yellow inside that little window leaned warmer as they drew level, the color of a kitchen when someone stands up to answer a knock. Something ticked from the flatbed and kissed the black top at Warren's boot, a short brass screw, threads bright, in a spot where paint had protected it. He rubbed it clean against his coat. The oval of wear around its head matched the tin numerals in his pocket. He slid the screw in with the others and heard, through cloth, the soft bump of metal learning where it lived. The sacks behind the rail gave their patient answer. 2, 3, 2, and stilled. Here, Warren said, as if he'd been asked. He didn't raise his voice. He put a palm out at the driver's window, and the truck stopped like he'd touched the brake himself. The driver did not glance over. He had that steady stair rail hold on the wheel. "We stop at the map," the driver said. Not refusal, just a line that had been true a long time. The little clipboard on the dash showed position 12 with the careful 6 fixed over something darker. The ink looked older than the paper. The porch at the real 232 woke without glow. One click, off, another click, on, then steadied. There was no storm door to catch the light and double it. Someone had taken it down sometime after last winter. A woman in slippers across the way pressed a hand to her collarbone and let it go. "Before the storm door," she said to the air, as if confirming her own photo album. On the flatbed, the masked child nearest the blue mark tipped its head until the oval eye and the plywood window made a straight look through to the real porch. The small tear at the mask's mouth had lengthened to a soft, tired smile. Warren opened his coat with fingers that didn't fumble. He set the tin 232 together in his palm. The pieces met without him needing to push. He put the brass key with the blue tag on top and felt its teeth find the idea of a lock. He didn't climb the real porch. He stepped to the slate-blue rail and under the cut-out window marked 232, laid the numerals and the key on the plywood lip, as if returning a library book to the slot after hours. Metal touched wood with a sound as small as a held breath. The sacks answered once, 2, 3, 2, and then were quiet in a way that felt like a room settling. Behind the little window, the yellow deepened and bent, as if someone passed between lamp and wall, and then stood with a hand on the switch. In the real house, the porch bulb made a tiny stutter and then held. Nothing moved on the stoop. No one came out. In the cab, the turn signal did not click. The driver's hands stayed at 10 and 2. The fire truck at the mouth of Birch gave its friendly whoop, and it arrived at the right distance this time, not the long hallway version. The deputy let his shoulders down a fraction. "We good to back them?" he asked, voice low, so as not to jar a thing that had landed. Warren kept his eyes on the little window and the real porch. He listened to the Methodist tower send its one late chime down the block, and this time he checked his watch and found the minute hand sitting exactly where it ought to sit. Not early, not late, right on itself. "Straight to City Hall," he said. He wasn't correcting anyone. He was saying what was true next. The driver lifted his foot the way a man lifts it after saying grace. The wheel didn't twitch. The truck eased forward like a page being turned. The tin numerals and the brass key stayed on the rail under the cutout 232, riding there like mail tucked to be taken. The masked child by the blue mark lowered its head a degree, not a bow, just done looking. The pilot light breath thinned to the ordinary stew of October, wool, kettle corn, the damp of leaf piles. They reached the mouth. The sawhorse didn't scrape. It stood where it had stood and let them pass back onto Main without protest. On the opposite curb, a man in a watch cap breathed out and put his hand back in his pocket, surprised to find his fingers empty, as if he'd meant to hold a thing he didn't own anymore. Warren let the block fall behind them and took his place at the gutter again. He did not look back at 232. He didn't need to. The map and the street had agreed enough for one turn. City Hall's light sat clean at the top of Main like a finish line that didn't need a ribbon. The card table waited under the lamppost, safety pins in a dish, pencils in a jar, a clipboard with sign-out lines and a coffee ring. The announcer's scarfed voice softened as he read the last cards. "Food shelf walkers," he said, steady. "And our friends in fire and rescue, thank you for coming out tonight." No stumble, no surprise. The stack had run the way a stack likes to run. Marla stood from the radio chair and shook her knees loose. "Right on cue," she said when Warren came, "even with the table. You kept them tidy." She glanced past him, and her mouth made a small, thinking line. The slate-blue flatbed rolled up exactly to the chalk and stopped like it had measured the distance in the dark. Warren put 2 fingers down to show the chute. Pull forward, angle in, idle. The driver's hands stayed at 10 and 2. The turn signal did not click. Behind the plywood houses, the masked kids let their sacks rest against their knees. No clack came. The pilot light breath had thinned to October again. Wool, popcorn, damp leaves. He walked to the rail under the blue-marked cutout. The tin numerals and the brass key he'd laid there rode exactly where he'd left them, neat as mail waiting in a slot. He put a gloved finger to the ring. The metal was the temperature of his glove. He did not move them. He only checked that they were not in his pocket anymore, and they weren't, which felt correct. "Let's get your sign out," Marla called, the calm tone she used when filling forms for nervous folks. She set the clipboard on the fender where drivers always leaned to write. "Unit name, contact, phone. We'll get you on the spring letter, too." The driver did not lean. He slid one hand from the wheel long enough to touch the edge of the paper with a knuckle, like a man testing if varnish had dried. "Neighborhood," he said. "Birch." He made no move for the pencil. Marla smiled the way you do when you've already filled out part of a form. "Association contact?" She flipped a page back with her thumb. "You were on April's draft, home front theme." Her nail paused over a line where a faint old number lived under an erasure. "Withdrawn May 6th, no reason given." "Placed at 12, the driver said. It wasn't stubborn, it was his whole explanation. Warren lifted the clipboard from the fender and checked the April sheet himself. The 6 in the date looked clean now, no darker, 5 crouched under it. He blinked and set the page back. His hand remembered the drag of graphite that had been there, the way a finger remembers a scratch on a table, even after you sand it. A Polaroid clicked from the curb. The fox-eared girl from the stand had come down this way. She found the square and held it out to her friend. "Look," the friend whispered. In the small picture, the slate-blue sides looked like painted siding instead of plywood, and lace hung in the little windows as if someone had ironed it. The kids weren't kids in the photo. They were shapes where a hall would be, faint as breathing. The fire truck idled behind the float, and when the chief gave his cheerful horn a tap, it sounded exactly as close as it ought to sound. The Methodist tower sent a single chime down Main on the minute. Warren didn't need to look at his watch to know it. "Name for the driver?" Marla tried once more, pen ready. The driver looked through the glass the way a man reads a distance. "Caretaker," he said. He didn't try to spell it. He didn't have to. He set his hand back on the wheel. "Pull into the side lot," Warren said, mild. He stepped and angled a palm toward the municipal garages. We'll tuck you by the salt shed. We'll work the paperwork warm." The driver eased the truck forward a half-foot, then back a hair, the neat correction of a person who has parked in the same spot a long time. He did not turn toward the side lot. He rolled straight ahead the short length to the shadow that sits between City Hall and the records wing, the service cut where maintenance trucks disappear, slow as a man going into a hallway he knows in the dark. Warren moved to guide him, ready to put his body where a cone goes. He lifted his palm. The slate-blue flatbed slipped past him without brushing his coat. It did not squeal. It did not cough. It threaded the shadow like it had been measured for it. Warren reached the corner in 3 long steps and looked down the service cut. There were trash cans in their places, a mop bucket in a little shed of light, brick, the door with the closers. The cut ran to a chain link and stopped. No flatbed. No tail lamps. The pilot light breath did not live there. It was only night. Marla came with the radio on her palm. "Do you need PD on that?" she asked, not moving closer, not crowding the place where something had just gone. He shook his head once. "We'll note they exited at City Hall," he said. He kept his voice steady. He walked back to the card table, set the clipboard down, and, before he could think better, wrote the line himself. Neighborhood, Birch, home front. Position 12, exited, City Hall, service cut. Under contact, he put nothing. When he looked up, the tin numerals and the brass key were no longer on the rail under the blue marked cutout. The plywood there showed a faint oval where metal had sat for a time. The masked kids were only kids again, in the way kids are when they're told the game is over and they have done the rules well. The sacks were quiet. The turn signal did not click. The line, for the first time that night, felt like it had landed on itself. Clean-up ran the way clean-up always did. Scouts in safety vests walked with grabbers. A line crew rolled cord. Someone stacked sawhorses like cards. The announcer boxed his mic and tucked the scarf into his coat. City Hall let its light stand steady. The flag ticked a little and then rested. Warren signed 2 vendor forms, returned a dropped mitten, and made the small decisions that put a night away without making a speech about it. Marla closed the radio ledger with her palm. "You want a ride?" she asked, meaning the 3 blocks he always walked anyway. "I'll stretch it," he said. He set the April draft and tonight's sheet flat under the thermos so they wouldn't blow. The line that read, Neighborhood, Birch, sat quiet on the paper like any other line. No erasures showed. The 6 in the date looked as if it had always been a 6. He cut across to Main and turned left where the curb learned his boots. The pilot light breath wasn't there now, just October's damp and the thin sugar of popcorn stuck to brick. People folded chairs. A last stroller tire clacked a raised seam and bumped free. In the Methodist tower, the clock gave the hour on time. He didn't count it. He let it be. At Birch, he paused at the mouth out of habit, more than need. The sawhorse faced upstream again, legs square. Birch, faint under paint if you knew to feel for it. Crabapples dotted the black. The hydrant's blue cap showed its chip like a chipped tooth should. He put a hand to the horse and found ordinary wood. He walked in 2 doors. Tomb 14 kept its lean. 220 kept its dented rail. 226 showed the brick chimney real, not pencil. The porch at 232 held its light the way a porch should, when someone's home but not waiting at the window. No storm door sat there now. If one had sat there last winter, it was gone. The brass numerals on the jamb were the old air blue ones, not aluminum. Their screw heads had a shine that might have been from a cloth today. or a cloth 10 years ago. He didn't touch them. He didn't test the screws. He only stood long enough to let the picture agree with itself. A sound from inside reached the porch, small and ordinary. Not a knock, not a hush. The sound you get when keys meet a dish by a door. 2, 3, 2. Then quiet, the good quiet that happens when people are home and doing nothing worth writing down. He stepped back to the sidewalk. In the bush by the steps, a blue paper tag lay damp against twigs, the hole torn out where a ring goes. The letters had bled a little, but 232 Birch still stood up plain. He didn't pick it up. He left it where weather would make its own choice. On his way back, a scrap of heavy paper showed in the gutter where the flatbed had eased earlier. He turned it with a gloved finger. It was the same penciled map he'd put in his pocket at the start, or its twin. Main, 2nd, 3rd, the neat spur back into the route, position 12, written in tidy blocks. At the corner, the date had no correction now, just the clean 6. He set it on the curbstone to dry and didn't take it. City Hall still held its lights when he reached the table. Marla had capped the pens and tucked the pins. "All good?" she asked, not making it big. "Line ran," he said. He slid the clipboard into the drawer where clipboards sleep. He felt the shape of a key out of habit and found nothing, which was correct. His inner pocket held only his own pen and the fold of his glove. The fox-eared girl and her friend came past on their way home, Polaroids cupped like birds. "They'll smear if you stack them," he said, friendly, and the friend said, "We know," the way kids say when they're being careful, and want you to see they are. He did not ask to look. He already had enough pictures. He crossed Main one last time to check the service cut because you always check the place where a thing left. The mop bucket glowed a little square of light. The trash cans sat in their spots, lids down. The chain link ended the view without drama. He stood a breath and listened for a pilot-light whisper and heard nothing but his own coat sound. On his desk at home later, hands washed, coat on a chair, lamp low, he wrote the incident line the way a person writes a grocery list. Unit 12, neighborhood, Birch, kept place, observed at Birch, exited City Hall, service cut, no hazard. He left the box for follow-up empty. He dated it with the neat 6 he'd seen all night and put the page in the file with the others. Outside, the town held itself in its winter-ready way. The clock on his mantel ticked in the plain, on-time way clocks hope to. When he turned out his lamp, a faint porch light 2 streets over blinked once and then kept steady, which is how a good light says nothing more to say. Morning put the town back in its regular clothes. Leaves showed their wet shapes, tire tracks on Main dried to pale ribs. Warren liked streets in daylight after a night shift, everything honest about where it had been. He swung by City Hall because he always did, even on a night that had ended neat. The card table was folded, the bunting lay in a stack like quilts. Marla had left a note on the radio ledger that just said, "Thanks" in block letters. He wrote "You're welcome" smaller under it, and set the pen where pens go. He took the parade folder to the counter by the window and flipped to April. The draft page he'd studied last night met him without frayed edges. Birch Street Neighborhood Association, home front theme. In the margin, the withdrawal stamp read, May 6th, clean ink, no smear. He rubbed the corner with a thumb, no grit, no erasure crumbs. The date he'd thought of as a 5 corrected to a 6 looked like it had only ever been a 6. He didn't argue with the paper. He just let it sit. On his way out, he passed the service cut out of habit and found it nothing but a cut, brick, a mop bucket, 2 trash cans with their lids. No marks where a bumper would have kissed a wall. He checked his watch and then the Methodist tower by reflex. Both held the same minute and didn't argue about it. He walked Birch in daylight because daylight makes a different picture, and he liked both. 214 held its lean. 220 had a kid's chalk line on the lowest step from yesterday afternoon. 226's chimney was brick plain and not a pencil ghost. At 232 the porch bulb was off and the glass of the big window showed only the room across it, table, a radio with wood sides, a coat draped over a chair. No storm door, brass numerals on the jamb, air blue paint in the grooves. Someone had wiped them recently. You could tell by the clear crescent around each screw head. He didn't touch them. He didn't have to. A woman from across the street stepped down to fetch her paper and paused when she saw him. "Parade went nice," she said, as if they were in the same kitchen. "Ran straight," he said. He kept his hands out of his pockets so he wouldn't check for a key he knew wasn't there. She glanced at 232 the way people glance without staring. They had the door off for months, put the numbers back up yesterday finally. I told him it looked right, the old ones. He said, "We kept the brass." She tried a smile and made a real one. "Takes some people a while to put things where they go." He nodded. "It does." From inside 232 came a sound ordinary as rain starting. A set of keys brushed into a dish. 2, 3, 2, not loud, not a sign, just a house being a house. The woman didn't seem to hear it because it belonged to someone else's kitchen. He did because last night had tuned him to that measure. At noon, back at his desk, he filed the incident sheet where incident sheets go. He slipped a paperclip on because it felt like a knight that ought to hold itself. The fox-eared girl had left an envelope with his name in ballpoint. Inside sat a single Polaroid. The slate-blue sides in the square looked like siding, not plywood, lace in the windows. On the back she had written position 12, Birch, and the date in tidy numbers. The 6 was clean, no darker figure underneath. He didn't pin it to the board. He slid it into the folder behind April and let it live there. The phone on the corner of his desk rang once and settled. He didn't get it in time and didn't mind. He took his lunch out of brown paper and ate at the window like always. Apple, sandwich, a thermos cup of coffee that had kept the morning. Across the street the gas company truck rolled past. Men in blue jackets. No hurry, because there was nothing urgent to fix. He breathed and found only coffee and paper and the varnish of his desk, no pilot light whisper hiding in the mix. At home that night he set his keys in the little bowl by his door and listened to their small report, 2, 3, 2, because that's how his own ring fell when he didn't think about it. He smiled at himself for listening. He made supper. He set his coat on the same chair he always set it on. Before bed he opened the parade folder once more to be sure he'd written the line he meant he had. Exited, City Hall service cut. The handwriting was his and looked like his. He shut the drawer. Down the block, a porch light blinked once like a person checking a switch and then stayed steady, which was right. He turned his own lamp off and let the room keep its place. Tuesday gave the town its work face. Coal scuffs on loading docks, chalk dust in the school hall, the drugstore bell dinging for the first aspirin customer. Warren stopped by the high school because the math teacher kept the parade index cards in his room until the clerk ran them to storage. He liked to close loops with people, not just paper. The teacher had stacked the cards by a chalkboard with long multiplication on it. He pushed his glasses up when Warren stepped in. "Good show," he said, voice quiet, in the way empty classrooms make voices quiet. Your line walked like it meant it. Warren thumbed the stack, the way a man checks boards for warps, tractor, band, walkers. He found the birch card by the texture. It had more handling on it than the others, a polish you get from a pocket. Position 12 at the top in pencil sat clean as print. He held it near the window. No darker figure lived under the 6 now, no ridge under the graphite. If there had ever been a 5, the card didn't remember it. "You looked twice at that one on the stand," the teacher said. "Not nosy, just a line from a careful person." "Only wanted to read it right," Warren said. He set the card down. The pencil had pressed hard enough to leave a ghost on the card beneath. He lifted the top one and saw the mirror dents, POSI, backward. He slid the stack straight and let them be. Outside, a boy dragged the painted sawhorse from the gym wall to the loading door, then leaned it to wipe grit from its feet. The old stencil showed under the newer stripes when the rag went wet. Birch, ghost letters the board couldn't forget. The boy ran a thumb on the letters like a kid tracing his name on a lunchbox. "Should we repaint?" he asked. Warren shook his head. "It reads." He felt the push of the letters in his own palm again, the way cold wood speaks through paint if you keep your hand there. He walked Main on his break and nodded to folks who nodded. At the 5 and dime, the fox-eared girl had taped a single Polaroid to the corkboard by the door with a pin through the white border. "Parade, position 12, the caption said in block ballpoint. People stood and looked without touching. A man in a work jacket said, "Siding looks like my aunt's place," and a woman said, "Those curtains are the old ones." And then they both made the small shrug people make when a thing is ordinary and not. At City Hall, Marla had set the radio ledger on the sill to air where coffee had nicked it the week before. "You sleep?" she asked. "Enough," he said. He didn't tell her he'd stood a while by his own door the night before listening for the report his keys made when he set them in the bowl. 2, 3, 2. It had been nothing but his keys, which was exactly what he wanted. After lunch he took a slow walk up Birch because the street lived in his legs now, like a route you keep after a job changes. 214 had laundry on a line in the backyard, soft as breath. 220 had a broom leaned by the rail. 226's new brick caught sun and held it. At 2:32 the porch showed the small fix of a man who'd worked that morning. The brass 3 had been turned a hair to sit level. The shine around the screw looked new. Through the big window he saw a radio with wood sides and a cup on a saucer beside it. A person crossed the room the way a person crosses a room, no hurry. A hand set something down near the door. The small sound came, the kind kitchens make when metal meets a dish. 2, 3, 2. Then the air went back to being air. He didn't stand long. He moved on because the street didn't owe him a picture. By the hydrant, the blue cap's chip still looked like a nick in a thumbnail. Leaves in the gutter made their paper sound. Somewhere down the block, a hammer tapped twice and stopped. The Methodist clock gave the quarter on time. He checked his watch out of habit and found the same minute, the same tick. Back at his desk near 4, he pulled the parade folder and added a thin sheet with 4 lines, one for each sawhorse they'd swung, one for the extra stack of pins they'd returned, one for the card file handoff, one for the note that the Birch card sat in the teacher's pile until storage. He dated it. The 6 in the date walked from his pen like it knew where to go. When he locked up, City Hall's service cut was just brick, mop bucket, chain link, no shadow, holding a shape. He stood there one breath, the way a man stands at a door he used last night to be sure it still goes nowhere. Then he put on his coat, set his hat, and walked home on streets that put themselves under his shoes without asking for attention. On his porch, he set his keys in their bowl and listened to their small report, 2, 3, 2, and smiled at the ordinary truth of it. Just metal, just a dish, just a night ready to be put away, the way nights like to be put away. By Wednesday, parade talk had thinned to errands. A barber taped his "Thanks for coming" sign flat. The bakery scraped sugar from the window with a razor blade. Warren moved through the small job City Hall kept for him between bigger days, lamp globes, a hinge that squealed on the assessor's door. He liked the way tasks made lines you could draw with a pencil. The clerk at the front desk slid him a thick brown envelope with his name on it. "Drugstore drop," she said. "People turn in pictures for the scrapbook. You're the one who doesn't lose them." He took the envelope to his corner desk and spread the prints in a fan. Tractors, band, little kids with paper crowns. He set aside the doubles the scrapbook didn't need. The slate-blue flatbed showed up in 3 frames from different hands. In the first, taken near the bank, the plywood read as siding, planks where he knew only one sheet had been. In the second, by the reviewing stand, lace sat in the tiny windows like someone ironed it an hour ago. In the third, taken near City Hall, the angle caught the rail under the blue-marked cutout. The place where he had laid the numerals and key looked darker, a soft oval like sweat on a table. He touched the photo and found only paper. He flipped each print to check the backs. One had House Street in a child's hand, crooked block letters. Another said, "Home front float, nice," in a lady's script. On the last, neat ballpoint had written only "Caretaker." No name, no phone. He slid that one under the clip on his desk, so he'd have to look at it when he set his coffee down. Marla knocked his door jamb with a fingernail. "Math teacher walked the index cards over," she said. "Box is in storage. You want me to sign the transfer?" "I'll do it," he said. He liked to put his own initials when a loop closed. The storage room lived cool and honest under the records wing, concrete, shelves, a pull-chain light. He found the box marked "Parade," cards, and eased the lid. The birch card lay a third of the way down, right where it should. Position 12 in pencil at the top, date clean, no ghost below the 6. He held it in the light. Impressions showed faint on the card beneath, the mirror dents of the word "position" and the numbers 1 and 2 pressed through. He slid a scrap behind the birch card and shaded lightly with his pencil, a trick the shop teacher had taught him in 8th grade. Letters and lines rose in soft grey from the card below, old marks, not new. He blew the dust off and put both cards back the way he found them, stacked square. On his way up, he cut by the service passage because habits are easier than new ideas. Brick, mop bucket, chain link. Nothing moved. But the small concrete apron at the mouth held 2 thin arcs in the dust, close together, the way rubber leaves a shy hello when it pauses and then goes. He knelt and touched them with a knuckle. The dust came away on his glove. Outside he walked Birch, because the street had put itself in his path whether he asked or not. 214's trash lid rattled in plain wind. 220's broom had fallen over. 226 had a new bag of salt on the step, folded neat. At 232 the porch held morning shade, bulb off. The brass numerals sat level. The screw on the 3 had a fresh nick, a careful hand makes when it finds the slot and stops when the metal tells it to. Through the big window, table, radio with wood sides, a coffee cup on a saucer, a coat thrown neat over a chair. A person crossed the room the way a person crosses a room, because that is where the door is. He didn't stare. He kept moving. 2 houses down, a boy chalked boxes and numbers on the walk for a game that needed a stone. He set a key ring down while he rubbed grit from his palm, and the ring gave its small report. 2, 3, 2, because keys do that sometimes. No one looked up. No porch light blinked. The Methodist clock gave the half-minute in its tidy way. Warren checked his watch and found the same minute. He didn't write anything down. Back at his desk he filed the photos the scrapbook wanted and kept 2 extras the book didn't need, the stand view and the City Hall angle, with the dark oval under the blue-marked cutout. He slid them under the clip with the one that said caretaker. He wrote a line on a half-sheet, the way he wrote things when a knight still had a thread. Return path honoured, paper and street in agreement. He didn't add more. At closing, he locked the drawer, hung his coat, and took his hat from its hook. The service cut stayed a hallway to nowhere. The mop bucket shone the size of its light. On his porch at home, the bowl by the door waited like bowls do. He set his ring down and listened. 2, 3, 2, and smiled at the way an ordinary sound can be both only what it is and still feel like a story has put its hand on your sleeve. Far off, a porch light blinked once and then held, a good habit, keeping itself. He turned his own lamp low and let the room be the kind of quiet that doesn't need him to name it. Thursday put frost on grass thin as breath. Warren liked the sound of a town before engines warmed, coal scoops, one door chain rattling, the janitor's mop bucket rolling the school hall. He made a list on a yellow pad, bulbs for the stairwell, new cord for a flag halyard, touch-up on the sawhorses. Lines you could draw and then cross off. Hartman's hardware smelled like rope and cardboard. Mr. Hartman counted washers as if they were coins you didn't have to hide. "Morning, Marshal," he said, the way men say hello to men they see every week. "Need halyard cord and a quart of white," Warren said, holding up a fingertip to show how much paint the sawhorse feet had lost. He let his eyes pass the small parts wall because he liked seeing order live in bins. On a peg, brass house numerals hung in paper sleeves, new ones, clean font, bright screws taped to the front. Beside them, a dusty strip of hooks held 3 sleeves from an older run, a 1, a 4, and a 5, with air blue paint in the grooves and ovaled screw holes from shelfware. A bare hook between had a handwritten tag that read, "2, out." Hartman followed his look. Those blue groove ones came with a shipment right after the war. Folks liked them till they didn't. I keep a few for the stragglers. A fella was in yesterday for a screw to match an old 3, slotted short thread. Said the head stripped easy if you forced it. I told him you don't force them. "From Birch?" Warren asked, because the question had its own weight. "Could be," Hartman said. He didn't make it a story. He turned to the counter and set the rope in neat coils. "You want the quart mixed? Plain's fine." Warren paid and put the small sack flat in his coat so the cord wouldn't kink. He touched the empty hook once with a finger and felt only metal, not a message. Back at City Hall, he set the sawhorses in the workshop and brushed the feet where the street had chewed them. When the fresh white took, the old letters showed through just enough. Birch, like a postcard, rubbed under paper. Paint covered it on the second pass, but he could still feel the word under the bristle, the way a knot shows you where the tree was. Marla set a thin envelope on his blotter. "Dropped at the front for you," she said. "No return." The paper was the kind you buy in a grocery aisle. Inside, a single line on ruled sheet in tidy block letters, "Thank you for keeping place." No name. No address. He held it to the light. The pencil had pressed hard enough to leave time in the paper. He put the note in the parade folder without a clip and shut the drawer soft. He walked Birch at dusk because dusk makes a different truth, and he liked that too. Frost had lifted. Damp came back. 2:14's porch light clicked on and stayed. 2:20's broom stood again. Someone had set it right. 2:26 let its new brick give off stored sun. At 2:32 the porch showed a fresh wipe along the jamb where a hand had cleaned fingerprints a person leaves when they steady themselves. The brass numerals sat square, the 3A hair truer than yesterday. Inside, the radio with wood sides gave off that small room hum. Someone crossed the window the way someone does when going to answer a kettle. A sound came to the door, keys into a dish, not performed for anyone. 2, 3, 2. Then the room went back to being a room. He didn't linger. He let the corner take him, the hydrant's chipped blue cap catching a piece of municipal light. Down on Main, the Methodist clock gave the hour on time. He checked his watch and didn't need to, which he took as a sign of an ordinary evening worth keeping. At home, he set the new cord on the table and the paint by the door so he wouldn't forget it in the morning. He put his own keys in the bowl. Their small report was the same small report it had always been. He smiled at it, not because it meant anything more, but because it meant itself. He ate, washed his plate, and opened the parade folder to write one last line on the incident sheet. Saws repainted, no further action. The 6 in the date wrote itself without thinking. He closed the folder. The lamp threw a circle on the wood. 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once and then kept steady, like a person testing a switch and deciding it would do. Friday started with rope in his hands and a sky the colour of a clean sheet. Warren liked a halyard before coffee, the way new cord runs true through a pulley when you've measured it right. He tied his knots, pulled steady, and watched the flag take its small wind above City Hall. The line purred in the throat of the pole. No snag, no scrape. He crossed the item off his yellow pad. Halyard done. On his blotter, a manila inter-office envelope waited with a paperclip bent like a fishhook. Marla in quick letters. Inside, one photocopy, the kind that browns at the edges when a machine is tired. Parade Archive, 1946, a handwritten tab said in the corner. The picture showed a flatbed with plywood made to look like real siding, lace at small windows, children in coats with paper masks that tied with string. The caption block had been underlined hard. Position 12, Birch Street, home front. The date in the lower right was clean, OCT 31, 1946. No numbers corrected, no pen strokes heavy from trying to make one thing into another. He held the copy at the window. The float in the old picture looked like the one he'd walked beside. Less sharp, more fog, but the same plain lines. A figure had been caught in the glass of a window, only the suggestion of a shoulder and a head, the way a picture gets when the light chooses the glass instead of the room. In pencil, under the frame, someone from years back had written a single word in careful block letters. Caretaker. He slid the copy in with this year's folder and did not label a new tab. Loops like to be closed, not every loop wanted a name. He painted the last sawhorse feet after lunch. The second coat hid the ghost letters to the eye, but his brush still felt where birch lived under the white. He cleaned the bristles with slow figure eights in the sink until the water ran clear and set the brush to dry on its edge. The workshop held the ordinary smells, mineral spirits, dust, rope. Gas company called, Marla said from the doorway. Birch patch is fully cured. Deputy wants you to sign the release and stick it to the book. Good, he said. He signed the small form, 2 lines and a date. The 6 walked off his pen without asking anything from him. He took his walk when the light went gold. 2:14 showed a rake leaned just so. 2:20's broom lay down again. Someone gave up and left it. 2:26's brick held the last of the day and threw it back calm. At 2:32 the porch bulb clicked on without show. The brass numerals sat true, air blue in the grooves. The screw on the 3 caught a dot of light and kept it. Through the big window, a radio with wood sides glowed low. A person crossed the frame with the everyday care of someone who knows where the table leg is. A sound came from the door, the one he'd told himself to let be only what it was. Keys set down the way keys set down. 2, 3, 2. He let the sound go by him and kept walking. At the mouth of Birch, a kid from shop class had propped a sawhorse to dry after washing brushes. The fresh white showed no ghost to anybody's eye. The kid knocked the board with a knuckle. "Good feet," he said, proud of paint that covers. Warren put his palm on the top rail and felt, faint as an old scar, the letters under paint make their shape against his skin. He didn't say anything. He took his hand away, and the world looked like it had always looked. On Main, the 5 and dime corkboard still held the fox-eared girl's Polaroid. Someone had written, "Thank you, volunteers," under it in marker. Letters like a banner. People didn't stop as long now. The photo belonged to yesterday the way photos do. He let it. He cut by the service passage because a man keeps the turns he's used. Brick, mop bucket, chain link. No shadow that held a truck. The concrete apron showed rub marks from the garbage pull and a crescent from a dolly wheel. Nothing else. He stood a breath anyway, hands in pockets as if feeling for a coin he knew he hadn't brought. The Methodist clock gave the hour on time. He didn't check his watch. He already knew. At home he hung his coat, set his hat, and put his ring in the bowl. The sound it made was the sound it had always made. 2, 3, 2. Then one small extra tick as the ring nudged the edge of the dish and settled, a screw head finding its slot and stopping where metal tells you to stop. He smiled at his own kitchen for being a kitchen. Before he turned out his lamp, he wrote one more line on the thin sheet he'd started for the week. Birch, patch cleared, file copy, 46, added, no variants. He dated it. The 6 was clean. He put the page away and let the drawer shut, the way a door shuts when it isn't holding anything back. Outside, 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once, like a person checking the switch, and then stayed steady, which is what a good light does when it means to. Saturday gave him eggs at the VFW and a list of little jobs he could do with a cup of diner coffee, hinge oil, a bulb in the stairwell off the assessor's hall, a note to himself to return Mr. Hartman's quart when the last sawhorse foot dried. He liked Saturdays when there wasn't a big thing to steer. Streets sounded like porches instead of crowds. At City Hall, he set the brush back in its sleeve and wiped the rim of the white before he shelved it. Marla poked her head in with her coat half on. "You heading to storage?" she asked. "The clerk wants the 46 copy in the right drawer before somebody borrows and loses it." "I'll walk it," he said. He slid the photocopy into a manila folder so it wouldn't scuff, then took the stairs down to the cool room with the pull chain and the shelves that smelled like paper, that had behaved itself for a long time. He found the parade hissed file by feel. Inside, a thin carbon set from 1946 lay under the tab, carbon blue still showing through onion skin thin. The incident note was in square, careful letters. Neighborhood, Birch, Homefront, position 12, kept place, observed at Birch, exited City Hall, service cut. A small penciled word lived in the margin, same tidy hand as the caption on the photograph. Caretaker. No name next to it, no address. The date at the bottom had no correction, just the clean 6. He added the photocopy behind the sheet and, because he believed in making quiet things easier for the next person, he wrote a line on a yellow slip and tucked it at the front. See also 1968, same path, no variants. He didn't make a new tab. He shut the drawer with the pressure that makes a latch sit. Back upstairs, the clerk was propping the foyer door for some air. "We got a note in the mail drop," she said, and handed him a small envelope. Inside, on ruled paper, a line in block letters. "We'll keep the brass. Thank you for the map. No signature. He turned it over and saw, in the lower corner, a bit of graphite where someone had checked a point and then stopped, like a man touching a dot on a route to be sure it's still lined up. He walked Birch because Saturday light shows you all the ways a street is itself. 214 had a chair on the porch with a blanket over the back. 220's broom stood in the corner. Someone had taught it better or given up again. 226 had a cat in the window that blinked at him slow. At 232 the brass numerals sat square, a little sun making the air blue in the grooves glow for a breath. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides hummed a tune you don't need to know the name of to know it. A person crossed the frame with the careful economy of someone who knows where the rug ends. Keys met a dish by the door. 2, 3, 2. He didn't slow. It wasn't for him to stand there like a survey stake. Back on Main, Mr. Hartman had moved a new sleeve of brass numerals onto the peg where the handwritten out had been. Found a box in back? He said when Warren stepped in to return the paint. 2, 3 2s, a 3, and handful of screws with the right slots. Funny what a shelf will give you when you clean it. He said funny the way people say true. Warren bought 2 screws he didn't need and put them in a little envelope because having them made his desk feel correct. On his way past the 5 and dime, he noticed the corkboard Polaroid had been straightened. Someone had written in smaller letters under the caption, "Kept place." He didn't know who. It looked like the kind of handwriting anyone could have. He cut by the service passage because he always would now. Brick, mop, bucket, chain link. The concrete apron showed only the new crescent a dolly wheel had made that morning. Nothing else asked for a note. He went back inside and wrote the small things that close a week. 46 sheet refiled, note left, will keep the brass, thanks returned. He dated it. The 6 walked off his pen as if his hand had learned it a long time ago. At home that evening, he set his ring in the bowl and heard its good, small report. 2, 3, 2. Somewhere 2 streets over a porch light blinked once and kept steady. The Methodist clock found the hour without apology. He put his coat on the chair, warmed his supper, and let his lamp throw its circle. When he was done eating, he rinsed his plate and dried it and set it where it always went. The ordinary put itself away which he had always liked. He sat a while with his yellow pad and a pencil, and because he believed in leaving tools better for the next hand, he wrote a short line at the bottom of the marshal notes for parades. If a unit holds position without help, let it. If a corner asks for a thing and a street has already given it, keep your line. End at City Hall, make your log, turn off the lights. Then he turned off his, and the room kept its place. Sunday put the town in low gear. Mail slots quiet, church coats, the groceries cooler, humming like someone thinking. Warren liked the way a day with no list still held small lines if you looked. Coffee, walk, a check on a hinge that squeaked only when the building was empty. He stopped by City Hall to put the parade folder back where it slept because he trusted his own hand on the last move. The office smelled like paper and mop water that had done its job. He opened the drawer and set the folder in. Before he slid it shut, he pulled the thin sheet he'd started and added one small line in his neat block. 46 and 68. Same notes, no hazard, courtesy holds. He didn't call it a pattern. He wrote what fit on one line and left the rest alone. On the inside cover of the parade binder, a spot where a person would see it when the world turned a certain way, he penciled 3 words and a date he didn't have to circle. Check 12. 1990. He kept it small. Pencil fades if no one needs it. The library opened after service. He didn't set out for answers, only liked the cool of that basement and the way old pages made the same sound, whether you were ready for them or not. In a bound minute book with a green spine, a clerk from 1946 had written, "Marshal's note, neighbourhood, Birch, home front, position 12, kept, see photo." The word caretaker lived in the margin in tidy caps, no flourish. The 6 in the date was clean. He closed the book and set it back with a palm that said thank you to the person who kept it from warping. On Main, Mr. Hartman was sweeping his step. Warren returned the empty paint can and slid a small envelope across the counter, 2 slotted screws inside. "In case a shelf loses a box," he said. Hartman smiled the way a man smiles at inventory that behaves. "Funny what a peg asks for as the years go," he said, looking at the brass numerals. The handwritten out tag had been taken down. A sleeve with 2 blue-grooved 2s and 1 3 hung easy where it should. He walked Birch without trying to make it into anything. 2 and 14's blanket had moved from the chair to a rail to catch sun. 220's broom had settled in its corner as if it had learned manners. 226's brick glowed the way brick glows when it keeps a day. At 2:32 the porch bulb was off. Daytime didn't need it. The brass numerals sat true. The slot on the 3's screw caught the light in a small straight line. Inside, a radio with wood sides played something lazy, and a person crossed the room in that patient way of people in their own houses. The sound came, faint and ordinary as a detail on a grocery list, keys into a dish. 2, 3, 2, he didn't count. He only let it pass through the air like any house sound and kept moving because streets don't belong to one pair of shoes. The boy from shop class had chalk on his fingers and a roller in his other hand where the sawhorses leaned to dry. "Second coat cover's real good," the boy said. "Can't see the old letters." He was proud, which was correct. "You can feel them if you put your hand on the rail," Warren said. "Not as a trick, just a thing a person might want to know." The boy tried it, palm flat, and looked surprised by nothing visible. "Huh." He grinned like he'd found a nail head under paint without looking. "Cool." At City Hall he checked the service cut because that had become part of how he closed a day. Brick, mop bucket, chain link. A dolly scuff arced the concrete in grey, nothing else. He stood one breath anyway, and then turned the latch on the records door and listened to it catch. The catch sounded like a catch should. At home, the afternoon ran to its edges and sat there. He set his keys in the bowl, and the dish spoke its little answer. 2, 3, 2. The clock on his mantel ticked like a clock that had never argued with a steeple. He made a sandwich, ate half, saved half. He took his yellow pad and drew a short list for Monday: flag check, bulbs, Clark hinge. At the bottom he drew a square and wrote, small. Teach Lewis the hinge oil trick. He meant the shop boy, who had hands that liked rails. Before he turned out his lamp, he opened the parade drawer one last time, not to fuss, just to let his eye touch the binder where the pencil note lived. He shut it soft. 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once, not a signal, just a habit, and then kept steady, which is all he'd ever asked a light to do. He turned his own off. The room held itself like a room that knew where everything went. Monday started with a hinge and a kid who listened. Warren showed Lewis, the shop class boy, the trick with oil and patience. Wipe first, 1 drop on the pin, work the door slow so the sound has time to leave. Lewis nodded the way people nod when a trick fits in their hands. "You'll hear it stop," Warren said, and the boy did, and smiled because quiet is a thing you can make on purpose. On his desk, the parade binder waited where he'd left it. He slid the thin sheet forward and added a small line under the Sunday entry. Cards boxed, check 12 each year, courtesy holds. He kept the letters neat, the 6 in the date clean. Pencil, not pen. Pencil let a future hand decide. Marla set a rubber-banded bundle on his blotter. Drugstore had more prints, she said. People empty their pockets on Mondays. He thumbed through tractors, a candy bucket, the band turning the school hinge. One frame near City Hall caught the slate-blue flatbed square on, a second later than the fox-eared girl's picture. Lace showed in the little windows. Under the blue-marked cutout, a soft oval darkened the rail where his tin numerals and the brass key had sat. On the back, someone had written, in tidy caps, "Caretaker, thank you." Then a dot, like a person ending a thought. He logged a bulb for the stairwell, then took his noon walk. Maine carried its regular weight, ladder up at the bakery, Hartman sweeping grit from the entry with the same slow push he'd used since spring. "Found another sleeve in back," Hartman said without looking up, and tapped the peg where the air blue numerals hung. 2 2s, 1 3, a handful of short, slotted screws in a waxed envelope. "Funny what stays until it's needed," he said, funny like a man setting a level on a sill. Warren bought the envelope he didn't need and wrote cash on the receipt because small records keep larger ones honest. On the 5 and dime corkboard, the fox-eared girl's Polaroid had a neighbor now, a photocopy of the 1946 float, tape at the corners, caption in ballpoint, position 12, Birch. Someone had drawn a small arrow between the two pictures, not showy, just a line saying these are kin. He turned on to Birch because his feet did that now when they weren't told to do something else. 214 had a bucket at the rail with a brush set bristle up to dry. 220's broom had been nailed a hook. Someone had declared a place for it. 226's brick gave back a little warmth, though the day had gone thin. At 2:32 the porch showed a fresh cloth mark where a hand had wiped the jam, the way you do when you've put new screws in and want the smudges gone. The brass numerals sat true. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides glowed low. A person crossed the room, set something near the door. The sound came as quiet as a yes. Keys in a dish. 2, 3, 2. The porch bulb did not blink. It didn't need to. It knew its switch. Back at City Hall, he took the path past the service cut because a loop feels better after it's been walked. Brick, mop bucket, chain link. The concrete apron held only the new crescent from the trash dolly and the thin old arcs he'd touched with a knuckle on Friday, softer now under dust. The place made the sound a back hall makes when no one is in it. Air, nothing more. Lewis met him at the workshop door with a grin and a hinge that didn't cry. "It's in the oil," the boy said. Warren nodded. "It's also in the waiting." He wrote Lewis, hinge on the yellow pad and put a clean line through it, the satisfying way a pencil carries a task out of a day. When the mail came late, the clerk brought a small envelope with no return. Inside, a ruled strip with the same tidy blocks as before. Position held. See you next year? He turned the paper over. In the corner, a faint dot of graphite marked a place where a line might start on a map. He didn't draw it in. He slipped the note behind the April draft and let the manila close on it like a drawer closes when it knows what it's for. He locked up at 5. The Methodist clock gave the hour on time. His wrist agreed. He walked home on streets the town had measured a long time ago. On his porch, he set his keys in the bowl and listened without ceremony to the sound they made in his house, which was his house's own. 2, 3, 2. In the quiet after, he felt the small good of a job that is mostly keeping place. Saws painted, cords run, corners held when a corner asks, paper and pavement agreeing enough to get everybody home. At his table, he opened the binder one last time and penciled a line on the inside cover where his 3 words lived. Check 12, 1990. He added nothing else. He turned out the lamp. 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once and kept steady, the way a habit stays gentle when it's understood. The room held where it was. The night did what nights do. Tuesday evening put chairs in rows at City Hall and paper cups on a folding table that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. Warren liked council nights because minutes made a shape you could point to. He set the parade binder on the clerk's desk, waited for old business, and gave the line he'd written the way a man reads measurements. Halloween parade, route held, no incident, Birch gas patch cured, courtesy observed, City Hall exit used. He didn't add colour, he let the page be the page. A councilman with cold hands thanked the volunteers out loud. The room nodded the way rooms nod when a thing is finished and belongs to the folder now. The fox-eared girl, without ears tonight, just a knit cap, sat with her mother in back. When the gavel moved them to new business, she came forward shy as a library borrower and slid a duplicate Polaroid across to the clerk. "For the book," she said. The clerk pinned it to the cork strip above the copier while the meeting went on. Lace in the tiny windows looked like someone had ironed it this afternoon. After, in the quiet that comes when chairs go back to walls, Marla tapped the binder. "Leave a flag in there?" she asked. He knew what she meant, something a future hand couldn't miss, even if the tab got moved. He wrote a clean card in block letters and laid it behind the cover so it would fall out when the book opened. Position 12. Ask after Birch before renumber. He didn't underline it. He didn't need to. He slid the card in and closed the binder with the soft pressure that makes paper sit. He walked Main to cool his head. The 5 and dime corkboard now held 3 pieces in a neat column. The girl's parade photo, the clerk's clean photocopy from 46, and a small typed scrap someone had added at lunch. Home front, neighbourhood, kept place. No signature. The period after place sat there like a screw, stopped when it should. Birch looked like itself in streetlight, crabapples black against bulbs, the hydrant's blue cap catching a square. 214's blanket had come back in. 220's broom found its hook, like it had been born to that spot. 226's brick stored a little of the day and let it go slow. At 2:32 the porch bulb was on, steady. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides glowed low. A person crossed the room the unremarkable way people cross rooms, set something near the door, and the sound followed. Keys to a dish. 2, 3, 2. It made the small space of the porch feel like a porch, nothing more. In the bush by the steps, the torn blue tag he'd seen 2 nights ago was gone. In its place, caught on a twig, a thread of fine string held one knot like a memory of an elastic band. He didn't take it. He let weather do what weather does. On his way back, Hartman was locking his door. "Your young helper bought slotted screws," the hardware man said, pleased with the choice of a boy who'd listened to grain. Said some numbers looked better left as they were. He meant brass. He meant old fit in new holes. Warren said he's a quick study and touched the empty hook where the outie tag had hung. It held nothing now which looked right. At the workshop, he showed Lewis the parade binder because tricks live better when 2 people know them. "If you ever get stuck on a corner," he said, "listen for what the street already decided. Your job's to keep paper and pavement on speaking terms." The boy nodded as if a door hinge had just stopped crying in his head. He cut by the service cut on habit, brick, mop bucket, chain link, no shadow pretending to be a truck. A dolly mark curled like a comma in dust. He put his boot heel next to it and left no mark at all. The grit had settled since morning. At his desk he wrote one more thin line for the week. Flag left in binder. Ask 12 before renumber. The 6 in the date was clean the first time. He closed the drawer. Out in the hall, the custodian flipped off lights one bank at a time, the building stepping down to its night shape. At home, he set his ring in the bowl and listened, because he always would now, not for a sign, just for the way a house keeps its own count. 2, 3, 2. The mantel clock found the minute with no argument from the steeple. He turned his lamp low, let the room be a room, and thought, in the simple way a man thinks when a job has landed, that next October would come on its own. If a unit kept place without help, he would let it. If a street asked for calm, he would hold the corner and keep it calm. The rest could live in the binder until the page wanted to be read again. By midweek, the wind came from the river and made ladders knock once against brick. Warren liked the way a town squares itself for cold, salt stacked by the shed, cords coiled, paint lids seated with a heel of the hand. He took a quiet hour to make a thing he'd been meaning to make, a pocket card for the next marshal. On a half sheet he printed in block letters lines short enough to read on a corner. Keep gaps even, ask 12 before renumber, hold birch if a patch says hold. If paper and pavement argue, speak both languages. City Hall exit closes the book. He laminated it with clear tape because tape holds better than the idea it's supposed to hold. Lewis came in with red ears and a hammer hooked in his belt loop. Warren gave him the card like a shop ticket. "This isn't all of it," he said, "but it keeps you from stepping in the same holes every year." The boy read it and smiled the way a person smiles at something that will fit in a wallet. "Ask 12, he said, as if testing how the words sat in his mouth. Warren nodded. "You'll hear when it matters." At Hartman's, the bell thunked against the glass and a warm rope smell met him. A small box sat open on the counter, brass numerals in paper sleeves with air blue in the grooves, screws in a waxed envelope. Hartman tapped the box like a loaf he'd baked. Shelf burped up another set, he said. 2 2s, a 3, and the right screws. Fella brought back an aluminum plate he'd bought in '62. Said he never liked how it sounded when the door shut. He grinned at his own joke. Warren bought the waxed envelope he didn't need. "Spares," he said. It felt right for a desk to have. Back at City Hall, he set the envelope in the drawer with the parade folder, labelled it in pencil, neat, 232 extra screws, slotted. Above it, the binder lay where he'd left it, the flag card tucked behind the cover. Position 12, ask after Birch before renumber. He opened to the April draft and let his eye touch the clean 6 in the date, like a man touching a knot he'd tied yesterday. Paper held. The Methodist clock had been right 3 days in a row. He checked it anyway, habit more than mistrust. The hands agreed with his wrist without drama. In the records wing, he oiled the hinge he had promised himself he'd oil, the one on the map case that sang when no one else was around. One drop, work it slow. The cry left the metal the way steam leaves a bathroom. Quiet you make on purpose is a good kind. He walked Birch when the light went thin enough to show porch bulbs thinking about themselves. 214 had a new mat with a rope braid. 220's broom hung easy from the hook Lewis had put up, square to the siding, as if it had always belonged. 226's brick gave back a last shoulder of warmth. At 232 the brass numerals sat level. The slot in the 3's screw made a straight line that found his eye and then let it go. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides glowed low. A person crossed the room, set something near the door. The sound came as ordinary as a grocery list, keys into a dish. 2, 3, 2. Not staged, not for him. A house doing its house. He didn't stand, he walked. The hydrant's blue cap showed its chip like a chipped tooth should. Crab apples dimpled the dark. A runner went by in a hat with a pom, breath steady, not seeing him, because that's how streets work when everyone is where they belong. On Main, the 5 and dime corkboard had picked up one more scrap, typed this time, pin just off centre. Volunteers, thank you for keeping the line. No name. The period sat square. The fox-eared girl's photo held its place. The 46 copy kept it company. Someone had straightened the thumbtack so the corners matched. He cut by the service cut because the body learns a route faster than the mind unlearns it. Brick, mop bucket, chain link. The concrete apron's faint rubber arcs had faded under broom and dust. A new dolly crescent made its small grey smile. Nothing leaned where nothing should. He put a palm on the cool jam and felt only brick, the way brick is always brick. Back upstairs he added a single line to the thin sheet on his blotter. Letters square, no flourish. Pocket card made, screws set aside, nothing further. He dated it. The 6 wrote itself. He shut the drawer, and it shut like a drawer with nothing behind it. At home he hung his coat, set his hat on the same hook, and set his ring in the bowl. The report was the report. 2, 3, 2. He listened because he liked the sound and not because he wanted it to be more. The mantel clock and the steeple had no quarrel. He warmed a plate, ate what he warmed, rinsed his fork, dried it, and put it where it went. Before he turned out the lamp, he slid the taped pocket card into his wallet behind his license and thought, not solemn, just honest. Next year will make its own lines. If 12 keeps place, he'll let it. If a corner asks for calm, he'll stand in it. Then he turned the lamp off. 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once and kept steady, the way a habit stays kind when it's understood. The first flurries showed up in the weather window as a cartoon cloud with dots under it. Warren liked the way a town braces for snow. Salt slid forward in the shed, shovels leaned where hands could find them in the dark, cords checked twice on lights that would have to come on colder. He sharpened a carpenter's pencil and made a short list for winter. Flag halyard check, map case hinge once more, sawhorses stacked high enough that a wet floor wouldn't lick them. Lewis came in with a knit cap, and that look kids get when weather is brand new again. You carry the salt, Warren said, and the boy did, 2 bags at a time, with his chin tucked, pleased with his own back. They stacked the white sacks like bricks and tamped them with palms so the pile settled square. On his blotter, the parade binder sat where paper waits without asking. He opened to April and let his eye land on the clean 6 as if it were a compass point. Pencil on the inside cover still held, check 12, 1990. He slid the pocket card he'd made for Lewis between the sheets, so the boy would have to touch it next time a route got talked about. If you forget everything else, he said, keep gaps even and ask 12 before you move anything. Lewis nodded and read the line out loud once, making sure the words fit in his mouth. Hartman's bell thunked when he pushed the door for bulbs. The hardware man had put a little cardboard sign on the peg with the air blue numerals. Brass, old font, limited. Below, the waxed envelope of slotted screws sat easy. Funny, Hartman said without looking up from his ledger. How a thing waits on a shelf until a year decides it wants it. He wrote figures with a pencil the way a man writes when his hand has made that shape 1,000 Thursdays in a row. He walked Birch before the light thinned all the way out of it because streets looked truest just before they tipped tonight. 214 had a rug rolled by the door with the broom stripe neat on its edge. 220's broom hung from its hook and didn't argue. 226's brick kept what little heat the day had given. At 232 a small wreath of crabapple twigs had been wired to the rail. Not showy, just the kind of circle you make from what the street hands you. The brass numerals sat true. The slot on the 3's screw caught a sliver of dusk and held it like a line on a map. Through the big window he saw the radio with wood sides glow low. A person crossed the room at the same unhurried speed a person has when the floor knows their feet. The sound came to the door, nothing performed, nothing spared. Keys into a dish. 2, 3, 2. The porch bulb didn't blink. It simply stayed what it was, which felt like the right amount of miracle for a Tuesday that wanted to be winter. Back at City Hall, the service cut was brick, mop bucket, chain link. A dusting from someone's dolly wheel made a pale comma on the concrete. He put his boot down and left no mark because leaving no mark was sometimes the point. Upstairs, he wrote a line on the thin sheet he kept for the season. Salt stacked, pocket card placed, Birch walks as usual. He dated it. The 6 found itself. On his way home, the 5 and dime corkboard held its small column, the fox-eared girl's Polaroid, the 46 copy, and the typed slip. Home front, neighborhood. Kept place. Someone had pressed the thumbtacks deeper, so the corners sat flush. He touched one tack with a fingernail and felt the cork give back the way good cork does. Snow began as the sort you see only in the cone of a street lamp. He let the flakes find his coat and didn't brush them. On his porch, he set his ring in the bowl and listened the way a man listens when he isn't testing anything. 2, 3, 2. The mantel clock and the steeple agreed because they had gotten in the habit again. He warmed stew, set his spoon down quiet when it was empty, and pulled the parade folder close one last time before winter took the edges of days. On the inside cover he penciled a small square next to the old note and filled it in. Done, not urgent. He shut the drawer, and it shut like a drawer that knew nothing was pressing behind it. Out the window, 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once and then held, a kind of courteous nod between houses. He turned his own lamp low. The room kept its shape. The town did what towns do when weather asks them. It squared itself. It counted its keys by feel, and it kept the numbers on the door it had always meant to keep. By Thursday, the first real snow held the town to its edges. Salt took on the colour of old paper where cars had gone. Warren liked the way a storm quiets a map. You can see which lines matter by where boots show up. He checked lamp globes on Main and worked the hinge on the assessor's door once more, because cold makes metal remember old songs. Lewis hauled 2 more sacks to the shed and stacked them neat, palms tamping the pile square. On his desk the parade binder sat shut, pencil note tucked where a future hand would see it. He lifted the cover and let his eye find April. The 6 in the date held clean as ever. He slid the pocket card he'd made for Lewis back 1 page so it would fall in the boy's lap the next time logs were sorted. "You carry this next year," he said. "You don't have to say the words. Just know them." They walked Birch toward dusk because snow turns a street into a room, and rooms tell you if a chair's out of place. 214's mat was kicked clean. 220's broom hung from its hook like it had always been taught to mind. 226's brick kept a little sun and let it go slow. At 232 a small brush had swept the top tread. The line of the sweep looked like one careful palm. The brass numerals sat true, air blue in the grooves. Through the big window a radio with wood sides hummed a station that didn't ask anything of you. A person crossed the room with the economy of a floor that knows those feet. The sound met the door, not loud, not a sign. Keys into a dish. 2, 3, 2. Snow softened the echo to a felt thing. A blue scrap lay in the hedge, fresh torn at the hole where a ring goes. Lewis reached, but Warren shook his head. "Weather will take it," he said. The boy let it be and watched the porch light come on steady like a light, that has learned not to blink at its own switch. Back on Main, Hartman's bell thunked thin in the cold. Warren traded 2 slotted screws he didn't need for a length of sash cord he'd need by spring. "Those blue groove 2s and 3s finally moving?" he asked. "Funny thing," Hartman said, scratching a figure. "It's like the shelf knew when to cough." He slid a waxed envelope across. "For when a head strips and a hand knows when to stop." At City Hall, Marla had left a ruled strip on his blotter in tidy blocks. "Thank you for holding corners. No return." He held it to the lamp and saw nothing hidden, just pencil pressed honest. He put it under the April draft and closed the binder, soft. Snow deepened in the service cut till brick, mop bucket, and chain link were all one colour. He stood a breath anyway. The concrete apron showed only the fine track a mouse might make if a mouse wore clean shoes. He smiled at the quiet of nothing special happening in the right place. At home, he tapped his boots, hung his coat where coats go, and set his ring in the bowl. The house gave its small answer. 2, 3, 2. The mantel clock had the minute. The steeple agreed, both on the second, like people who've made peace. He warmed soup, ate, washed his bowl, and set it mouth down to dry. Before bed he pulled the binder close and penciled one line on the thin sheet. Snow, no variance, Birch Walks. He dated it in neat figures and let the lamp go. Outside, 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once, then kept steady, which is the whole job of a light on a night that doesn't need news. January pared the town down to its hinges. Things worked or they didn't. Warren liked that kind of math. He checked the flag halyard in a sting of air, cleaned grit from a lock with the corner of a card, and showed Lewis how a map case opens without holler when you oil the pin and wait. "Most of it is waiting," he said. The boy listened with his hands. In the records wing, he'd boxed autumn minutes. The parade binder slid into its slot with the other binders that held other years, all spines the same brown that makes time look organized. He took the 46 photocopy out, looked at it by the pull chain light, and put it back behind the thin carbon note where the word caretaker lived in tidy caps. He didn't add anything. Paper had enough words. Hartman had put a cardboard sign at the brass peg. Old font, limited, 2 2s, 1 3. A waxed envelope of short slotted screws sat behind the counter for the few who asked and knew what they meant. "Shelves teach patience," Hartman said, writing sums slow. "You don't look for a thing for 15 years, then you find 2 boxes the week you quit looking." Warren walked Birch on a hard blue day when breath smokes and steps sound hollow. 214's rail gave a small, cold squeak when a mitten slid it. 220's broom hung straight. 226's brick kept the winter sun inside and let it out in a low warmth you could feel if you put a hand there. At 232, the porch had been swept 2 boards wide, tracks up and back clean. The brass numerals looked like a man had wiped them with a thumb on his way in. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides made a sound like a person who hums when they put on boots. Someone crossed the room at the speed of a life you don't need to narrate. Keys met a dish. 2, 3, 2. Not a pattern, just a house being a house. He didn't stop. You go by because you're not owed the room inside. At the mouth of Birch, a sawhorse leaned, with its feet newly topped in white. The ghost of Birch lived under the paint, in a way you can only feel if you've got your palm on it and time. He pressed his glove once, like a man who checks a knot because it's his job to know if it will hold. In the workshop, Lewis oiled the hinge on the map case he'd been assigned and waited for the quiet to arrive. "You hear it?" Warren asked. The boy smiled without looking up. "Yes." Quiet is a kind of instruction if you let it be. He added a small line to the thin sheet when the clock told lunch. Binders shelved, hinges quiet, birch steady. He dated it clean. On the inside cover he touched the pencil note with a finger, just enough pressure to feel the drag of graphite that would fade if it wasn't meant to last, and shut the book. At home he tried his keys in his own lock, while the porch light made a small cone in the cold. The key turned the way keys turn when both sides of the door agree. Inside, the bowl gave its good sound, 2, 3, 2, and the house took him in without making him explain where he'd been. He warmed his hands on the kettle, ate from a plate, rinsed what he'd used, and set it where it goes. Out the window, a porch 2 streets over, blinked once, and then kept steady, not to tell anyone anything, just to say a habit had remembered itself. February pulled chairs close to radiators and put pencil behind ears. The parade committee met at the long table with paper cups, a tin of mints, and the draft map. Warren liked these meetings when they didn't turn into speeches. He set a straight edge on the route and kept the pencil light. "We have 10 confirmed floats," the clerk said, reading neat. "Grocery is out again, choirs in, tractors, band, food shelf walkers, renumber?" Heads nodded in the quiet way of small rooms that have done a job before. Warren made the pencil marks anyone would, numbers, gaps, a note by the bakery about walkers needing room. He paused at the space where 12 would land on a clean sheet. The committee looked to him because that is how rooms decide where to look. "Leave 12, he said, mild as a weather note. "If it stays empty, it stays. If a neighborhood shows, it has a place to sit." No one asked why. People who've lived on the same map know when not to argue with a number. Marla slid an index card to the clerk for the stack. In block pencil it read, "Position 12, reserved, Birch." The clerk's pen hesitated, then wrote it clean. The math teacher, who moonlighted as announcer, tucked the card behind 11 and tapped the corner so it would show when it needed to. "I'll read it as written," he said. After, in the workshop, Warren showed Lewis the way paper and street shake hands. He laid the clean map down and set a finger on the corners that always ask, City Hall, the school hinge, the mouth of Birch. "If a corner pulls," he said, "you don't pull back first. You listen, you hold the space it's asking for, then you make the picture match the ground." Lewis nodded, as if a hinge had just gone quiet in his chest. He slid the laminated pocket card back into his wallet and read the top line under his breath once. "Keep gaps even." The rest would live under that. At Hartman's, the peg, with brass, held a fresh sleeve. 2, 2, 3. The waxed envelope of short-slotted screws sat with a rubber band around it like a grocery note. "Somebody put an aluminum plate back on my counter," Hartman said, amused. "Said it pinged wrong when the door shut. I told him metal has a voice the house hears even if people don't." "Save me a sleeve," Warren said. "City keeps spares." He wrote cash again on the slip and folded the envelope into his desk drawer, labeling it neat. 232, extra. He walked Birch when the sky was the color of a lined page. 214 had a paper snowflake in the window. 220's broom gathered the little drift in the corner like it had a job. 226's brick held a dry band where the eave kept the wall from weather. At 232, the porch tread had one flat sweep in the middle and the S of one boot where a person had turned while thinking of something else. The brass numerals sat true. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides hummed a song that felt like a hand on a shoulder. The sound came with the door. Keys met a dish. 2, 3, 2. He kept moving. It wasn't for him to stand on a man's porch and count the way his house kept time. At City Hall, he penciled one clean line on the thin sheet. Draft set, 12 reserved, briefed Lewis. He dated it without looking. The 6 went where it belonged. He shut the binder. The room made the even noise rooms make when work has found its box. On his porch that night, he set his ring down and heard the answer he'd come to expect. 2, 3, 2. The mantle and the steeple had fallen into the same habit again. He ate, rinsed his plate, dried it slow so quiet could do its work, and turned out the lamp. 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once, the way a person tests a switch and then trusts it, and stayed steady. October came back the way October does, smell of leaves and wool, a low band of light at 5, ladders leaned for paper ghosts. Warren liked the week when paper turns to living order. He walked the staging lane with Lewis and let the boy call gaps, then let him fix one. A tractor, too close, a banner that wanted to slant. "Hands say it before your mouth needs to," Warren said. The boy nodded and used his hands. The index cards lay on the stand table in a stack the math teacher had already taught his fingers. Position 9, he rehearsed. Tractors. He slid 11 and let 12 show itself under the corner. Reserved, birch, block pencil, no flourish. He didn't look at Warren. He didn't need to. The card would read the way a card reads. At 6:58, the marshal whistle blew. The line breathed and moved. Snare drums stitched the air. Parents pointed, then stopped pointing, because they'd rather just look. The grocery gap didn't hurt. People don't miss what a map didn't promise. Between 11 and the fire truck, a quiet showed up the way a chair waits for the person who always sits in it. Lewis felt it before he named it and lifted his palm to the slate-blue flatbed that eased into the space like it had only stepped out for a year to get its coat. No banner, simple sides, plywood that read like siding if you didn't stare. Cut-out houses with numbers penciled clean where paint would go. 214, 220, 226, the blue marked 232. Behind the rail, kids in coats with paper masks steadied sacks that didn't rattle like candy. The driver wore a cap, hands at 10 and 2. He did not look around. He didn't need to. Warren walked the gutter in the old way, half in parade, half out. He didn't need to speak. If a corner thought about pulling, he would be there when it started to think. The pilot-light breath he remembered from a year ago felt like a normal part of October now. Furnace season, rooms warming, not a sign. People waved. An older man in a watch cap lifted a hand toward the blue-marked cutout and let it fall as if the motion had cost him less this year. "Kept the brass," he said to nobody, pleased with his own door. They reached the school hinge. Lewis stepped ahead, set his palm on air where a cone would go, and let the slate-blue flatbed see the turn it was already going to take. The turn signal clicked once, left, polite, then slept. The wheel didn't twitch under the driver's hands. The truck took the right with the line and made the U that sends everyone back to town. The fire truck's friendly horn arrived at the right distance. No hallway echo this time. The Methodist clock gave its one chime on the minute and didn't apologize for anything. At Birch, a sawhorse with clean feet stood square to the mouth. Lewis looked to Warren and got the small nod that means, yes, you are doing your job. He held his palm where the line should be and watched the left front tire think about the paint and then change its mind without anyone telling it to. On the rail, the little houses passed steady, the blue-marked window pausing the way a man pauses when he checks a knob before bed. Keys inside sacks answered once. 2, 3, 2, and then were quiet, like a house when the last dish of the night has been put down. They came to City Hall. The slate-blue flatbed kissed the chalk at the mark. then eased forward into the shadow between buildings the way a maintenance truck that belongs there goes where it goes. Warren didn't crowd. Lewis didn't either. They reached the corner together in 3 long steps and looked down the service cut. Brick, mop bucket, chain link, air. The space a thing leaves when it goes where it belongs. On the card table, Marla set the clipboard as she always did. "Sign out?" she asked the air, polite to the picture, even if paper didn't take ink tonight. Warren wrote the line the way he'd written it before. Neighborhood, Birch, home front, position 12, exited, City Hall, service cut. He didn't add no hazard. It was in the shape of the sentence. The boy in the knit cap looked at him with the look you get when a trick lands in your hands. "You'll run it next time?" Warren said. He meant, keep gaps even, hold corners. The street asks you to hold. Let paper and pavement speak to each other. The rest would say itself. Snow came early the next week, clean lines on rooftops, and a soft edge on everything that wanted one. Warren liked the way a small town keeps its weather. Shovels in the right corners, salt where feet actually go, lights that decide to be steady when a switch asks. He put the parade binder in its winter shelf with the other books that knew their jobs and wrote one last thin line on the sheet behind April. Position 12 kept, Lewis held Birch, City Hall exit used, no variance. He dated it. The 6 fit his hand without thinking, and he slid his pocket card into the boy's palm on the workshop step. "You carry this," he said. "If a year wants a thing it didn't put on paper, your job is to let it ask and answer in the right places." Lewis looked at the lines. "Keep gaps even. Ask 12. Hold Birch, if a patch says hold. If paper and pavement argue, speak both languages." City Hall exit closes the book, and nodded in the slow way a hinge nods when oil has done its work. Hartman came to the counter with a sleeve in his hand like a man bringing bread. "Last of the air blue," he said. 2 2s and a 3. Screws to match. Then it's whatever the next shipment decides it is. Warren bought them for the drawer, labelled 232, extra, and wrote cash on the slip, because some habits keep you honest even when there's no one to check. He walked Birch near dusk in a snow that only showed in the cone of porch bulbs. 214's mat had the clean stripe a boot makes when it wipes without thinking. 220's broom hung on its hook. A drift had shaped itself around the post and didn't mind. 226's brick held a blush of warmth under white. At 232 a small wreath of crabapple twigs wore snow like lace. The brass numerals sat true. The slot on the 3's screw caught one thin line of porch light and held it. Through the big window, the radio with wood sides glowed, and a person crossed the room the way people in houses cross rooms to set a thing down where it goes. The sound came, quiet and ordinary. Keys in a dish, 2, 3, 2. He didn't count. He let the sound be a house. Snow put a hush on the street that made everything the right size. He touched the rail of the sawhorse leaned by the shed on his way back, fresh white on its feet, the ghost of birch under paint, a thing only a palm could feel. It felt like a word you've said enough times to know where it lands. At City Hall, he wrote one more card for the front of the binder and slid it behind the cover where it would fall into the hands that needed it. If 12 keeps place without help, let it. If a corner asks for calm, stand in it. If a street gives you back what the map forgot, write the line and go home. He didn't sign it. The handwriting would tell who had meant it. He cut by the service cut one more time because a man who has walked a route doesn't love to unlearn it. Brick, mop bucket, chain link, a dolly crescent in powder. No shadow pretending to be a truck, no surprise trying to be a message. Just the air where a thing had gone when it was done. At home he hung his coat, set his hat, and put his ring in the bowl. The report was the report, gentle and complete. 2, 3, 2. The mantel clock and the steeple kept the same minute without looking at each other about it. He warmed stew, ate what he warmed, rinsed, dried, and set his fork where it lives. At the window, 2 streets over, a porch light blinked once and then held, which is all a good light owes a night. He turned his lamp low and sat with the quiet the way you sit with a friend you've known since work started being work. The town held itself in the ordinary way that makes room for what doesn't ask to be explained. The map and the street had found their picture together. The book had its line, the door at 232 had its numbers, the corner had its calm, and somewhere, on a route he could trace with his feet in any weather, a space kept itself ready, position 12, so a thing that knew where it belonged would never have to argue its place. The street holds its quiet again. City Hall keeps its light, and position 12 is only a number on paper until next Halloween. Sleepy history. Horror files tonight's notes, sets the chair back under the desk, and lets the room breathe. Listeners are invited, softly, to leave a trace before leaving the night. City and local time for the map, the device playing in the dark, TV, phone, earbuds, and one small detail they noticed that others might miss. Those who want more nights like this can add a gentle subscribe. The bell can wait for morning. Requests for future history, horror, years, towns, old places with clean dates are welcome in the comments. Names and places will remain true. The telling will stay calm. The lights go low. The binder closes. The clock and the steeple agree. Sleepy history. Horror thanks whoever kept it company and wishes them a steady porch light, a quiet hinge, and a key that knows its dish. Good night.